It was deep night outside, and only the light from a lantern illuminated the street. The calm of the night was disturbed by the scream of a girl. The man began to come closer and closer to the girl, despite her screams and requests not to come closer. The girl was very scared, but tried her best to defend her boundaries in front of the man. However, the man was not going to listen to the girl's wishes, and he said that he was going to rent a room for them. Since the girl saw that her words were not helping to achieve the desired effect, she swung her bag at the offender in a panic. The man grabbed the girl by the back. He said that he spent a lot of effort to get here and was not going to leave empty-handed. The man was much larger than the girl. He intercepted her hand, and the blow never reached its target. The girl continued her attempts to escape from the man's grip when someone's voice ordered her to stop. Behind the man, a silhouette of a guy appeared, asking the man if he was ashamed of kidnapping the girl. The couple turned at the sound of the voice, and they saw a guy who looked like he was from another time. The man couldn't believe that he was really seeing this strange guy in front of him. The girl looked at the suddenly appeared savior with a mixture of surprise, fear, and relief. The guy was serious, his blue eyes reflected a gleam of determination, and his hands were clenched into fists. And so the guy stood in front of the girl's offender and looked at him menacingly. This guy was actually the main character of this story, Fong Ning. His consciousness was inside his body, and he could only watch what was happening through the screen. In fact, Fong Ning was a brunette, and his hair was much shorter. Fong Ning's eyes were almost black. This happened due to certain circumstances that began 24 hours ago. The meteor was approaching the Earth. And very soon it could be seen with the naked eye, as if it was flying right over the buildings. A large number of people watched this unusual phenomenon in fascination. They pointed to the cosmic body and said that it was a shooting star, which means they should make wishes. The shooting star continued to fly across the night sky and stood out strongly despite the bright night lights. Meanwhile, in one of the apartments there were 4 monitors on a table, each running a different task. Fong Ning ate the instant noodles with great pleasure. There was a full trash can under his table, into which he threw another package. While eating, he was playing a game on his laptop when a notification caught his attention. The guy grinned as he looked through the notifications and laughed a little. Fong Ning opened the notification window and began reading posts about the shooting star. He began quickly typing the answer as this was simply a sign that his system had been activated. After he wrote everything he wanted, Fong Ning quickly published his post. Suddenly the tea in his mug began to splash and spill out onto the table. The chair in which he was sitting also suddenly began to shake in different directions. The guy was scared. He still didn't know what was happening, but he assumed it was an earthquake. Fong Ning turned around to look around his apartment and understand what was happening. He started to get up from his chair, but due to trembling, he tripped over one of the wheels. Fong Ning realized that he was falling, but he could not do anything. He flew forward, and his chair flew behind him. The guy hit his head on the edge of his desk with great force and started bleeding. He hit himself so hard that blood splattered across the table and stained his laptop. Fong Ning raised his head with difficulty and saw the consequences of his fall. He tried to reach out to his laptop, but his whole body was too weak. The guy began to fall again, but this time backwards. He started talking about his laptop. But I could only finish it in my own thoughts. The laptop was very expensive. Fong Ning saw his feet in front of him. And then he finally fell to the floor. His chair lay nearby, and the guy himself was unconscious. Notifications from the site continued to arrive, but no one read them. The laptop was left standing on the table covered in blood. And while the guy with a severe head injury was lying on the floor unconscious, in the middle of the night, the system began to activate. As morning came, the sun's rays began to filter into the room. They landed on Fong Ning's face, which made him open his eyes. The guy sat down on the floor and touched his head, remembering yesterday's events. Fong Ning was surprised when he found no blood on his hand and thought it was a dream. The guy decided to get up from the floor and check if his laptop was damaged. But when he stood opposite him and extended his hand to the laptop, he suddenly froze. No matter how Fong Ning tried to force his body to move, it did not obey him. The guy got very nervous and thought that, most likely, he still hadn't woken up. Suddenly, a sign appeared in the room, announcing that the activation of the system had begun. He already imagined a beautiful future in which there was a system, money, beauties and fame. Fong Ning was overjoyed when he realized that he would now have his own system. The guy was completely absorbed in his dreams of being at the top of humanity. But his joy was disrupted by a new notification from the system, which stated that the guy had an incurable disease. Fong Ning was extremely indignant because he had been examined every year and would have known about the disease. A new alert appeared. It reported that the carrier had severe fourth-degree procrastination and needed to take over the body to survive. It was as if he was dissolving into pixels right in the air. His legs were starting to disappear. His body was disappearing into a blue glow and he couldn't do anything about it. The guy felt very strange. A blue glow appeared around his body. Fong Ning felt panic take over his mind, and his head also began to disappear. After the guy's entire body evaporated in a blue glow, he found himself in a strange, unfamiliar place. He began to look around in confusion. Fong Ning did not fully come to his senses. He didn't find anything familiar around him and wondered what happened and where he even was. Fong Ning grabbed his head in panic and screamed when he realized the situation he was in. The guy admitted that he was quite lazy and did not cut his hair until his hair grew to his chin. He sat on the floor and sadly realized that the system had actually taken over his body. He also washed his clothes only when all the clean clothes were gone. In response to Fong Ning's thoughts, the system stated that this was not just laziness, but exceptional laziness. The guy jumped to his feet and started arguing that she couldn't be exceptional because he wasn't even on the news. To this guy's reaction, the system said that he was handsome, but still a bachelor, and asked if he had common sense. Fong Ning was annoyed and said that this did not justify the system's actions, and in general he used the body for 20 years. The guy concentrated all his strength and tried to regain control of his body. He strained every cell of his body and tried his best. The guy ordered his body to move. Despite all his efforts, it did not move even an inch. Therefore, Fong Ning exhaled in disappointment. The guy lay down on the floor out of hopelessness and thought that only the ability to think, hear and see freely remained. The system completely took over the body and did not pay attention to Fong Ning's dissatisfaction at all. After analyzing the condition of the guy and the apartment, the system decided to clean up the habitat first. Fong Ning could only watch as the system used his body to do a spring cleaning. The guy continued to demand that his body be returned to him, but they did not listen to him, and gradually the apartment became clean. Thus, the system in Fong Ning's body spent the entire day cleaning. The guy watched this from his mind and couldn't believe that his first task was cleaning. The system changed the guy into sportswear and was about to go outside. Fong Ning asked her they were going so late. In response, the system explained that the cleaning was completed and it was time to take care of the guy's physical condition. Suddenly a girl appeared at the door. When she saw the guy getting ready to leave, she noticed that this was a rare occurrence. The girl looked down on the guy and asked if he really had time to be a diligent guy. Fong Ning's body looked at the girl in front of him. His face remained calm. The system notified the guy that they were trying to establish a conversation with him. She asked Fong Ning to choose one of the answer options. The guy looked at the 3 proposed options. They were all pretty rude. And Fong Ning asked the system if it was serious about only giving him these options. The guy began to think about what to choose. The first option was bookish, the second annoyed him, and the third was the most normal. As a result, after considering all the options, Fong Ning chose the third option, which included a cold look and leaving. The girl watched in surprise as Fong Ning stood up and simply looked at her. A strange atmosphere hovered around the couple, as if they were in some kind of romantic film. The girl felt embarrassed and looked expectantly at the guy in front of her. And when he simply turned around and left, she felt very irritated. She thought that this man had read too many novels to behave like this. Of course, she was very interested in where this guy decided to go in the middle of the night. The girl's phone notified her of a new message, and the girl looked at him with interest. The message said that the man would soon be with a bouquet of roses and asked whether the girl was at home. The girl smiled and began to type the answer. She decided that she didn't care about boys as long as she had a rich man. The guy ran through the night park, but soon stopped and tried to catch his breath. The system told the guy's consciousness that his body had reached the limit of fatigue, so the training was over. The guy noticed that he had done more exercises today than in recent months. Fong Ning watched with boredom as the system began to think about its next move. And I was surprised when the system unexpectedly announced that it was going to restore justice. The guy sat down anxiously and tried to find out from the system what it meant. But instead of answering Fong Ning, his body began to move quickly. The system quickly ran somewhere, and the guy kept trying to get answers from it. Fong Ning asked the system to stop and explain to him what was going on. Of course, the system did not respond to the guy's requests, and she jumped over the fence with ease. Very soon the guy landed gracefully on the alley, easily maintaining his balance. Fong Ning's body rose to his feet and he walked to the next fence. Somewhere ahead, a girl's screams could be heard. The guy's eyes began to glow, and the system announced that it had increased its visual range tenfold. And despite the distance between the arguing couple and the guy, he was able to see what was happening between them. Fong Ning watched the quarrel through the screen and recognized the girl as Zhao Ying. The guy tensed up when he saw how big the man was and asked the system if he should be the same. Fong Ning tried to convince the systems that this man was too strong a rival for them, but the system didn't seem to listen. After listening to the owner of the body, the system came to the conclusion that he was right, and she began to come up with a solution. After carefully analyzing all the options, she decided to use transformation, and the guy stepped onto the fence. As the guy flew towards the couple, his body began to transform, and Fong Ning was surprised that they listened to him. The system did not answer the guy, but his body was quickly changing beyond recognition. Now he looked like a cultivator. He had long white hair that grew while he was in the air. He finally landed gracefully on the ground, his entire body seeming to be exploring power. After landing successfully, Fong Ning stood up straight and loudly ordered the man to stop. These words attracted the attention of both men and girls, and they both looked at the stranger in surprise. The man let go of the girl and looked at the guy irritably, and Fong Ning asked how he dared to rob a woman. The anger was clearly visible on the guy's face, and he angrily asked the man what he was to blame for. The man silently looked at the guy in front of him for a while and tried to understand what had happened. When he finally realized the situation, the man began to laugh very loudly at the guy. He continued to laugh and pointed his finger at the blonde. The man called the guy a psychopath who dressed up to scare people. The man found it so funny that he had to squat down to calm down, and the girl thought it was filming. Fong Ning was upset that this time the system did not give him a choice and insisted on getting into trouble. Finally, the man became serious and told the guy to go about his business. He took a knife out of his pocket and began to threaten the guy with it. The girl got scared when she realized where everything was going. The man started running towards the guy with a knife in his hand. He shouted that he would kill him. When he got close enough to the blonde, he made a leap, intending to strike from above. The girl who remained standing behind was very frightened for the stranger and screamed. Fong Ning looked at the approaching knife blade and also screamed in fear, but his body remained calm. Therefore, when the man was close enough, the system began to strike, repelling the attack. After that, the guy dealt a strong attacking blow to the man with his palm in the center of the chest. This put the man off a little, and the guy concentrated energy in his palm and was preparing to strike the next blow. And the man with the knife was thrown at great speed over a huge distance. After the man's body touched the floor, he hit his head on the fence and the knife flew out of his hand. The man's whole body was trembling. He touched his chest and tried to address the guy. But he didn't succeed, because the hand with which he was going to point at him began to quickly weaken. Soon his strength completely left him, and everything began to blur before his eyes. And the man finally fell to the floor not far from the knife with which he had recently attacked the guy. The system won this battle, and now the guy silently looked at the losing man. Fong Ning looked at what was happening through the screen and noticed that the system was too ruthless and was using the style of the ancient hero. The guy was very inspired, and he also really wanted to be able to fight like a system. The system gave the guy a clear report about this fight, and Fong Ning began to read it carefully. At the end of the report it was said that Wang Hongda was killed, and for this the system gained 100 experience points. Fong Ning felt an unpleasant feeling begin to spread within his body when he saw that the man had been killed. The guy realized that the system, owning his body, killed a person in real life. The guy's attention was distracted from these unpleasant thoughts by the sounds of camera clicks. Zhao Ying actively took photos of the guy who saved her, constantly changing angles. The girl also did not forget to take a selfie with the blonde man in the background, and Fong Ning felt uncomfortable because of this. The system did not pay any attention to Zhao Ying's actions, and while the girl was looking through the photos, the system turned away from her. And with confident steps she began to approach her defeated opponent. Fong Ning watched her actions in surprise. The guy asked the system to use gloves if it wanted to touch the man. The system did not respond to Fong Ning, but she seemed to be considering his words. The guy's body began to be examined and searched the man to see if he had anything useful. Fong Ning was surprised when he saw that in order to do this, the blonde's hands were covered with something like ice. After searching the body, the system sent Fong Ning a report on the findings. 4,250 yuan were found. The guy was happy about this because there were only 850 yuan on his card, and with this money it was much easier for him. The system was the first in his life to take care of his food, home and clothing. She was also the first to give him money. Fong Ning lay down relaxed and began to enjoy this unfamiliar feeling of having someone take care of him. After that, the system notified the guy that she was going to try to console the girl, and Fong Ning was offered 3 options. The guy felt that he was in a difficult situation again, because the 2 options were talking about payment. Fong Ning decided that he would definitely not ask for money, so the first 2 options were definitely not suitable. The last third option remained, and the guy ordered the system to act according to this scenario. Therefore, the blonde man walked towards the girl, who was looking at something on the screen of her phone with a satisfied face. The guy stopped not far from the girl and Fong Ning began to doubt that the girl was in shock. He told the system that the girl was just sitting on the phone and was not in shock. The blonde stood silently for some time opposite Zhao Ying, who did not take her eyes off the phone. The girl never paid him any attention, and the system left the girl with one jump. Zhao Ying had already posted photos of her savior and showed the man who attacked her. The girl was absorbed in the comments under her new post, and she answered her subscribers. Zhao Ying was pleased with the amount of activity she generated with her post. But then the girl became serious when she saw comments discussing the criminal. People noticed that the man didn't look like he had just been knocked out, and Zhao Ying felt uneasy. The girl began to look around and only then noticed that the blonde man was missing. Zhao Ying felt her body trembling with fear, but she tried to control herself. So she began to slowly approach the man, who still did not move. The girl kept a short distance from him and began to hesitantly ask if he was okay. There was no response from the criminal, and the girl saw his face closer. Zhao Ying was very scared and screamed because she realized that the commentators were right. Her scream was full of horror, and only a street lamp illuminated the situation in the middle of a dark street. The blonde had already jumped away from the next building when the girl's scream finally sounded. Fong Ning noticed that they ran 200 meters, and the girl only now realized what had happened. The system continued to move away from the crime scene, and the guy suggested changing his appearance so as not to attract attention. There was no response to his proposal, and Fong Ning doubted that the system could even hear him. The blonde began to move closer to the ground as they reached the park where Fong Ning's training ended, and the guy headed towards the ground, despite the fact that there were tree branches ahead. After the guy was on the ground, he was hidden behind the bushes and a glow appeared around him again. Fong Ning's body returned to its normal form, a leaf clung to his lips. It was already late at night when Fong Ning and the system finally went home. The guy got to his apartment and opened the door to get inside. After the guy found himself inside his apartment, he stopped to catch his breath. Fong Ning tried to understand how the system, using his body, moved so quickly. After all these tiring events, the guy needed to go to the shower under warm streams of water. His gym clothes were forced to immediately go into the laundry drawer. The system turned off the water in order to properly lather the hair with shampoo, and while the guy's body continued to wash away all the accumulated fatigue of the day, Fong Ning realized something important. Even though the guy still couldn't control his own body, today had not come in vain. Fong Ning recalled all the situations today in which the system listened to his advice. The guy was inspired because this could mean that one day the system would give him the opportunity to dominate. After the system finished taking a shower, she dressed the guy in clean home clothes. Fong Ning's body left the bathroom under the gaze of the guy himself. The system went to bed, and the guy decided that since it was time to sleep, he needed to return the body. He tried his best to attract the system's attention to himself and ordered it to stay awake. The system sat in the lotus position and announced that it had decided to close. Fong Ning was angry that he was completely ignored as he slammed his fist next to him with a loud sound. The guy believed that it was very cruel of the system to treat him this way, but then something happened that he did not expect at all. His whole body felt very strange. Fong Ning examined his body and felt nutrients flowing through his stomach. A strong concentration of energy was also felt in the legs and arms. He could clearly sense the flow of energy within them. The guy felt it smoothly flow back and forth, as if circulating through his body. He wondered what this aura was and why he could not recognize it, and I decided that it was all about the system. Thus, the aura became increasingly stronger, and enveloped his body in soft sensations. And it was then that Fong Ning realized that for the first time in his entire life he felt so comfortable. His eyes slowly closed, and he thought that he himself could not use even a tenth of the aura. The guy decided that he couldn't close his eyes for a minute or a second, but Fong Ning's eyes continued to close despite this, and the guy started to fall asleep. As a result, he was never able to cope and fulfill his plans. Fong Ning fell asleep. It was finally morning outside, and the sun's rays beautifully illuminated the houses and trees. The system that still controlled the guy's body suddenly opened its eyes when it felt the sun's rays. The guy spent the whole night in the lotus position. The system sat on the bed for some time and thought about what to do next. Then she left the bedroom and went to the kitchen to look in the refrigerator. The system washed all the necessary ingredients for cooking under running water. After that, she carefully cut the cucumbers and tomatoes into thin slices. The guy also put the frying pan on the fire to prepare it for cooking. The system decided to fry fried eggs for breakfast. All her movements were confident points. After some time, breakfast was ready and the table was completely closed. Fong Ning continued to sleep peacefully inside his body all this time. His eyes began to slowly open only when the system finished preparing breakfast for his body. And all because he smelled a very tasty smell of food, which beckoned the guy to him. Fong Ning watched his body eat breakfast and commented that the system made an excellent cook. The guy was thinking about how much money they could earn per month if they took advantage of the culinary abilities of the system. And I decided that if they earned 50,000 yuan a month, you could open a store in a year and a half. The system finished breakfast and stood up abruptly, interrupting Fong Ning's thoughts because it touched him. Fong Ning complained that he was hurt, and he asked if he couldn't have stood up more carefully. But the system did not respond, putting another portion of breakfast into the slow cooker. Then I closed it with a lid and set it to heating mode so that the portion remained warm. Fong Ning remembered that he used to cook, but then deliveries appeared and he stopped doing it completely. The guy felt uneasy when he realized that in the kitchen there were only those products that belonged to Zhao Ying. The system froze in place, and Fong Ning looked at his body in surprise and tried to understand what the system was up to this time. The system stood in front of the multi-cooker for a while it was considering the decision, and then said that it was time to restore justice. Fong Ning was unhappy with this, and I tried to convince the system that leaving after yesterday's events was not the best idea. However, the system did not listen to him and headed into the hallway to put on his sneakers. She completely ignored all of Fong Ning's cries of protest. I opened the front door to leave the house. The guy shouted after the deleting system that now they have the skills to earn a lot of money. And he was angry that they didn't use them, but he also reminded the system that he needed to go to work anyway. The man walked slowly through the empty parking lot and looked for cars that could be robbed. The man spotted a black car in one of the parking spaces and came closer. This was a fairly old man. His name was Mingi. He looked out the window of the chosen car. This man gained the ability to control and create flames. He used it to burn car windows. And through the hole, which turned out to be, he took out the things supplied by the drivers. Usually these were handbags. Mingi took out her wallet from her bag and found a very small amount of money there. The man was disappointed by this fact and simply threw his wallet away in an unknown direction. The 68,000 yuan that he found were mere trifles for the man and not even worth the effort. Mingi continued to walk around the parking lot looking for a new target and stopped at another black car. In the interior of this car, he saw a luxurious branded women's handbag, which clearly should have contained more money. The man was glad that he managed to find something like that, and he was already looking forward to how he would take away a huge amount of money. He used his flame power again, and I was able to stick my hand into the car interior. The man tried to grab the purse right away, but it turned out to be further away than he expected. Since the position he was in was not very comfortable, he had to find the right angle. Mingi was very focused and did his best to finally get his prize. And all his actions were successful, because he was still able to reach his purse. He took it in his hand and began to pull it out of the cabin through the holes with which he entered the car. After that, Mingi opened his purse and saw that it was full of money. He smiled contentedly, because his expectations about this handbag were justified. Suddenly he heard someone asking if he was ashamed to do such things. At first this scared the man, and he was going to leave the parking lot as soon as possible. But while he was running away, you decided to turn around to look at the one who interrupted him. And what he saw made him stop and even put him in a little shock. Standing in front of him was Fong Ning, who was in his battle mode. He Mingi looked very confident and admitted that the guy scared him at first. He gave a caustic compliment to the blonde, and he asked the guy in front of him if it was his purse. After that, he Mingi summoned his fire ability, and she said that he felt sorry for the guy. The fire covered the entire surface of the man's body, as if they were one. He Mingi also released fire from his mouth and eyes and admitted that he now has abilities. The man prepared for battle and gave the guy one last chance to escape unharmed. Fong Ning watched what was happening and realized that he was not the only one who was helped by the shooting star. The guy wanted to tell the system something else, but it had already started moving forward. His body in this state was very fast and agile, and Fong Ming didn't even have time to understand what was happening. The blonde moved very quickly and was difficult to notice. Fong Ming was afraid for his life, while he Mingi watched his opponent's movements in shock. The next second the blonde was already behind the man, prepared to strike. The guy was about to strike with the edge of his palm, and it was quickly approaching the enemy. Since he Mingi was not prepared for such an attack, she easily achieved her goal. And this strong concentrated blow to the back of the head was enough for the man to be defeated. Fong Ming watched as the system used the dragon flight style skill to search the enemy. The guy had a report in front of his face about how the battle went. It turned out that he Mingi's important organs were damaged. Through this battle, Fong Ning gained 500 experience points and 34,522 yuan. The system continued to search the man, and the guy realized that it related to martial arts. Fong Ning thought that he was very lucky with this, but it would be better if he pretended to not like it. His thoughts were interrupted by an alert. It said that the system had raised the level, and the owner of the body received 30 minutes of rest. But Fong Ning was not happy, but rather began to complain that the system was treating him like a prisoner. He continued to shout at the system in an attempt to achieve at least some kind of reaction, but it was all in vain. Therefore, Fong Ning realized that his idea of playing hard to get was not a very good idea. Since there was no point in pretending anymore, the guy plunged into the joyful anticipation of his future vacation. The system did not wait for Fong Ning or somehow tell him about its plans, and she began to prepare for the jump. She ignored the guy's question about where she was going and pushed herself off the ground. Since Fong Ning's body was in battle mode, it moved very quickly and left the parking lot in one jump. The system again hurried to move away from the scene and jumped between houses. The blonde jumped over the barriers with ease, while maintaining great speed. After the system jumped over the obstacle, he needed several more jumps, and she stopped only when she reached the appointed place. This place was a public toilet, and the system calmly exited combat mode, returning the guy's normal body. Fong Ming's consciousness sat on the shoulder of his body as they returned home. The guy noticed his watch and realized that he had already missed work. He wasn't very happy about it because he'd probably just get fired. Fong Ning's consciousness began to be surrounded by a glow, and his small figure began to disappear. The next moment the guy was already in his body and had complete control over it. Fong Ning immediately noticed that his legs were more flexible and his body was much lighter than before. When the joy of these new sensations wore off, he remembered that there was something he wanted to do. Therefore, he called the system with all his might. He asked it to talk to him. She appeared in front of him in the form of a guy who appeared in battle mode. Fong Ning ordered the system to show him what it looked like. He asked to see the attributes panel, gifts, system backpack and much more. The guy smiled contentedly and patted himself on the chest. Once again he ordered to show him absolutely everything. The system showed him nothing. She only informed him that he had 28 minutes of rest left. Fong Ning was angered by this, and he was even a little offended by his system. The guy decided to demand to at least look at the system backpack, because he definitely had to have one. After all, the things he receives must be stored somewhere, and then exchanged for money. The system had a very displeased expression on its face. She was debating whether to show the guy or not. Ultimately, the decision was made in favor of the guy's wishes, and the system raised its hand. She snapped her fingers and the entire room was suddenly bathed in bright light. They were transported to a place where the things they had managed to obtain from the criminals were stored. Fong Ning began to take a closer look as the system continued to follow him unhappily. The guy took the phone and told the system that they might be able to sell it online. He wanted to tell her something else, but she turned away and said that there were 21 minutes left to rest. Fong Ning decided that his system did not have a technology module, so it received knowledge from his memory. The guy was sitting at his desk, in front of which his adventure began. He turned on his laptop and it slowly loaded all the necessary files. Fong Ning sat in his chair. He felt a little tired and realized that he had not been online for a long time. He spent some more time waiting, looking at the things on his desk. As soon as the laptop was ready for use, Fong Ning began to quickly search for news. He found a link to a website where he could read current news from his city. Fong Ning was tense and focused. He didn't know if he expected to see himself there. And the first video that caught his eye was called, Night vs. Criminal, and he was in the leading role. Fong Ning was very scared when he saw himself, albeit in his other guise, on the news site. However, this video was deleted almost immediately after the guy appeared on the site. Fong Ning saw that the video was deleted just now and decided that it was placed there to attract the attention of the author's PR. The guy thought that it was quite logical that the falling meteorite brought the system not only to him. He reflected on his luck and decided that his system looked reliable. Fong Ning was very upset that the world would never be the same again. Wang Hongda lay on the table while the girl confirmed that he was the man she posted online. After the identification was over, the police allowed the girl to go. Zhaoing was upset that the rich guy turned out to be a criminal, and the guy who saved her was now also considered a criminal. The girl remembered how the blonde looked, and she was very sorry that she would not see him again. She was walking towards the exit of the building when she realized that she had never thanked that guy for saving her. After the girl left, the men in suits returned to Wang Hongda's body. They were all standing close to the table with the body, and everyone in the room could feel the tension. Some men began to talk among themselves, while the rest continued to look thoughtfully at the body. The guy with glasses turned to Haichen with a request to get to the truth. The man slowly walked closer to the table and the men who surrounded him. When Haichen came close to the table on which the body was located, he casually glanced at it. After this, an eye began to open in the center of his forehead, and now all three of Haichen's eyes were looking at the body. When the man's third eye opened fully, light poured out of it. The light of the third eye was focused on Wang Hongda's chest and examined the circumstances of the man's death. Everything became clear to Haichen, and the man closed all three eyes and nodded to his thoughts. There were a few folds on Haichen's forehead, but they could easily be mistaken for wrinkles. Because the man was silent for a long time, Mosen asked him what he knew. Haichen explained that this was a kung fu technique, and at a very high level. The man came to the conclusion that this was done by one of those who received power from the star, and he wanted to restore justice. Haichen told the men that they don't have to worry if they want to hire the guy as an F-class cleaner. All the men were visibly upset when they found out that the guy was at such a low level. Mosen explained to the other guys that Haichen's ability to get to the truth was amazing. That was why he ordered the other men not to argue with Haichen. Mosen ordered to create a profile on this person called Fast A, but not to waste time on him yet. Haichen left the group of men behind him as they began discussing their work duties. Haichen walked along the empty corridor of the building and said that he wanted to meet a powerful newcomer. But it turned out that it was just a dummy and a waste of his time. Haichen stopped and looked around him carefully, and he noticed something. There was a sign on one of the doors that said there was a special purpose office here. Haichen thought that the people in this department were eager to gain their own superhuman abilities. However, no matter how many people they recruited, they could not compete with those who were already trained. At first glance it was an ordinary day, but once again the blonde ordered the criminal to stop. The system easily held the criminal, pinning him to the pavement. Fong Ning's consciousness sat on the blonde's shoulder. He told the system that this was the fifth criminal today. Fong Ning recalled the events of today, and realized that more than a month had passed in this day. The guy pushed these memories and thoughts away from himself. They did a lot today. And now Fong Ning understood why the system did not want to work as a cook. She behaved like a knight and did not try to be effective. Her main goals were to gain experience and money. After Fong Ning's words, a small version of the blonde appeared in front of him. The system asked displeasedly what he meant when he said such things. Fong Ning grinned at the system's reaction, and he was going to explain it to her. He said that you just need to separate the tasks of making money from the tasks of gaining experience. Fong Ning asked the system if the only way to earn points was to catch a criminal. The system frowned with displeasure, but did not answer the guy. And after that, she completely disappeared right before Fong Ning's eyes. The guy was shocked. He asked the system to return and not leave him and waved his hands in front of him. After that, the system appeared next to the guy again and admitted that he was right. She spoke behind Fong Ning, and he had to turn around. It turned out that the system was limited to chivalry. Fong Ning was very pleased with himself when he realized that he had made the right conclusions. Throughout the day, the system caught the criminals and took the stolen money for itself. But if innocent people appeared, she gave up her things and ran away. Fong Ning invited the system to develop a scenario for her and show her what it means to be intellectually crushed. The system was interested in the guy's proposal and ordered him to tell it quickly. Fong Ning said that they could obtain the treasure, donate it, then spread the word and stop criminals who want to steal it. The blonde frowned at the guy and thought about his words for a long time, therefore, they silently glared at each other. Fong Ning understood that this was the simplest method, and there were many more difficult options, but he believed that it was not worth the risk. After prolonged eye contact, the system gave its answer. He was categorically negative. Fong Ning was surprised when he heard him, but the system explained that they lacked the capabilities for such a plan. The guy was silent for a while. He tried to think of another way out of the situation. Fong Ning said that they should have some kind of system store, but the system said that they did not have any store. The guy didn't despair and asked if they had a gift bag for newcomers. The system opened one eye to look at Fong Ning and asked him what this prize package was. The guy grabbed his head and with hope in his voice asked if they at least had a prize lottery. The system became angry and began to ask why Fong Ning thought that all good things should be given for nothing. Fong Ning did not respond to this. He sat down and decided to ask what the system actually had in stock. The blonde still looked unhappy and pointed to a small pile of things behind him. Fong Ning silently looked at the money and some of the things they took from the criminals. The guy calmed down and asked what they needed to do to create such a treasure. The system showed a notification that to do this they needed level 5, 10 strength points and level 3 blacksmithing. The guy read the conditions for obtaining the ability to create weapons, and realized something would take a while. He remembered their recent fiery enemy, then his body strength increased by 1 and now he has all of them. In order to fulfill one of the conditions, it was necessary to get 4 more points. Fong Ning noticed the forging skill and asked the system how to develop it. The system happily explained that he would need to spend time and materials, and everything would take place on the territory of the system. Fong Ning asked if the place where they were now was a system space. But the blonde said that Fong Ning calls this place a system backpack. Fong Ning asked the system if he could be in this place alone, and she proudly told the guy that she blocked this function for him. Fong Ning was not very happy with this, but still could not influence it in any way. So I asked what he could do now, and the system pointed him to the forge. Fong Ning entered the blacksmith's house and began to carefully examine it. Everything looked like this house was straight out of the Middle Ages. There was also a fireplace burning inside. Fong Ning asked why the system couldn't make the highest level right away. The guy couldn't believe that the system liked the process of increasing levels. The system was unhappy, but was silent, and the guy wanted to ask her something else. But he didn't have time to finish, because the angry blonde was already opposite him and said that these are the rules. The system said it didn't know exactly why, but the world was about to get very dark. Fong Ning was scared when he heard this. He, of course, knew that everything would not be the same. But he was very sad to realize that there was no longer a future in which he could not play calmly. Fong Ning suddenly came up with an idea that seemed brilliant to him. The guy asked the system if he really didn't deserve a reward for his obedience. The system realized that he was going to get something in this way, and she asked what he wanted. Fong Ning started asking for an internet cafe so that he could relax sometimes, but the system exhaled its irritation and told him that it would not be fulfilled. The guy panicked and tried to come up with a good reason to create such a place. Fong Ning convinced the system that he was going to use the computer exclusively for good purposes. The guy suggested an option on how to look for a computer to find a job. The system suspected that he was deceiving it, and admitted that it could provide a cafe. But now the guy did not have enough experience to connect to the external network. Fong Ning was inspired and urged the system to quickly go fight for justice. The guy said that the system could show him its map and he would plan a route for them. And the system needs to make sure they have multiple changes of outfits so they don't get caught in the city. Fong Ning also pointed out that they should somehow solve the problem of leaving fingerprints and DNA. He smiled triumphantly and said that he learned all this through the internet. The system looked unimpressed as the guy told her that without him, she would already be in jail. And although the guy's words sounded rational, the system felt that there was a catch somewhere. It was already late evening outside and only some of the windows had lights on. Zhao Ying finally came home. She slowly walked into her apartment. After she closed the door behind her, the girl exhaled tiredly. The girl's attention was drawn to the door to Fang Ning's room, who was her neighbor. He was never there when a girl was hoping for company. The guy always played games. Zhao Ying once again remembered the face of the man who had attacked her and realized that she would not be able to sleep. The girl felt hungry, but had no appetite, so she decided to just watch a movie. Zhao Ying was passing by the kitchen when the smell of food caught her attention. She walked into the kitchen and realized that the smell was coming from the slow cooker. The girl came closer to her and hurried to satisfy her interest and open the lid. When the lid was opened, she saw the food left for her, which smelled very tasty. It was already late at night and the lights were on in only one apartment in the whole house. The clock showed that it was already midnight when the guy got home. He quietly opened the front door, trying not to wake his neighbor. But when I entered the apartment I was surprised to notice that the light was still on. Zhao Ying looked out into the hall from her room and saw Fang Ning standing still. She came out to him in her pajamas and asked if the guy had returned home. She smiled sweetly at the guy and waited for him to turn his attention to her. But Fang Ning turned to look at the girl. He looked at her silently for a while. And then he left the surprised girl alone while he went to his room. Zhao Ying tried to stop him and let's talk, and she asked if he had prepared the food. The guy was already opening the door to his room when the girl admitted that she had eaten everything. Zhao Ying felt awkward and said that she allows the guy to use her products for such breakfasts. Fang Ning did not look at the girl, but asked if she really liked breakfast. After that, he looked at her and admitted that he wanted to open a breakfast cafe. He asked the girl if she wanted to join, and Zhao Ying looked at the guy in surprise. The girl immediately imagined what other delicious breakfasts the guy could prepare and licked her lips. Therefore, she said that she would definitely agree to participate in this if the guy would cook such delicious dishes. Fang Ning began to go into his room and advised the girl to go to bed too, because sleep is important for the skin. Zhao Ying was surprised by this comment. Her eyes were wide open and she began to speak. But the guy interrupted her when he said that if she lost face, he would think about another roommate. Zhao Ying became angry. She folded her arms across her chest and thought upset that he was looking for profit in her beauty. The girl dreamily remembered the image of the guy when he was tidying himself up and realized that he was handsome. Zhao Ying yawned and realized that she was quite tired that day. So she started to go to her room, intending to get some sleep. The system locked itself in the room and the guy and said that it had a solution to the fingerprint problem. And she showed Fang Ning how his hand was covered with a transparent blue glow. Fang Ning looked at his body with interest and asked what it was. The system said it usually maintains an automatic protection state around the body. Fang Ning realized that it would work like a protective film and would isolate him from other objects. The system said that in fact it is needed to protect against some poisonous enemies, but it is also suitable for these purposes. Then the system said that all that was left was to avoid bleeding, vomiting or hair loss. Fang Ning immediately imagined what he would look like if he cut his hair bald. The guy didn't really want to resort to such a solution. He asked why energy cannot burn what is torn from the body. The system paused, pondering Fang Ning's words, because it would be really convenient. After some thought, the system said that it might be possible to do something similar. After this, the system told Fang Ning that it had several different auras. The system concentrated, and the aura around changed its color to red. She explained that she would just have to switch them. One of the guy's hairs flew off his head and when he touched the aura it began to burn. Fang Ning watched what was happening with delight in his eyes. It turns out that the problem has been solved. The guy thought that they needed to open an additional stream to control the perimeter. The system should have succeeded. But there was a problem with controlling all this. Fang Ning said that without a second person, nothing would work out. And the system immediately raised its hand and snapped its fingers right in front of the guy. And Fang Ning's double appeared in the room. The system explained that for this they needed the carpenter skill, but the double had few skills. Fang Ning was still in shock that such a thing was even possible, and now his double stood in front of him. It was a warm sunny day outside. The birds calmly flew about their business. There was a long line at the entrance to the small cafe. Almost all the people on this street were near this building. Zhao Ying asked one of the workers to hurry up and place an order for the third table. The men in line were surprised that the girl turned from a salesperson into a manager in just 2 weeks. The guest said that this cafe was a good place and she wanted to tell her friends about it. The guy looked out from the line and asked Zhao Ying to quickly expand the store. The girl smiled and said that she couldn't make such decisions without her boss. Fong Ning was in the kitchen. He stood in an apron and prepared dishes to give people their orders. At this moment, Zhao Ying came to see him. She playfully called out to the guy, calling him boss. She started spinning around in front of him and asked if he looked good in this outfit today. The guy continued to cook and didn't even look at the girl, but he said she looked good. Zhao Ying was upset when the guy reacted to her so indifferently. The girl approached the guy and hugged him from behind. She said there was too little enthusiasm in his words. Zhao Ying held one hand on the guy's shoulder and touched his stomach with the other. When that didn't work, she moved away from him a little, and asked if she was beautiful enough. The guy didn't even look at Zhao Ying, and he repeated the words about enthusiasm that the girl told him. He put the towel he was using to hold the frying pan aside, and took a break from cooking. He turned to Zhao Ying, who was surprised because she did not expect this from the guy. Fong Ning raised his hands as the girl continued to look at him in surprise, and the guy started clapping with a neutral expression on his face, and he repeated that the girl looked good. Zhao Ying watched his actions and felt uncomfortable with his behavior. She turned around and began to walk away from the guy. She told him he was terribly boring. Fong Ning's consciousness laughed hard because the girl hit the target, and his body really is like a stone. Then the guy looked at the two options that remained. In one, he hit on a girl, and in the other, he said that he didn't care. Fong Ning was glad that he chose the first option because it was the only one where he was not splashed with saliva to death. The guy asked the system if it had heard about that person's proposal. Fong Ning also believed that they needed to expand the business and open an entire alley. The system rejected his proposal, and she said that 2 hours a day for cooking was enough. Fong Ning was worried because the system rebelled and now ignored him. The system continued to actively stir the signature dish in the frying pan. All the necessary spices were added to the dish at once, and the cooking process itself looked incredible. The system seemed to work magic right in the kitchen. Her movements were confident and smooth. The system was about to put away the jars of spices when it noticed 2 extra drops of sauce flying into the frying pan. She reacted instantly, grabbing a spoon and hurried to the frying pan. Therefore, the system easily caught the extra drops and prevented them from getting into the dish. Fong Ning watched this and couldn't figure out what was wrong with adding 2 more drops. The system closed its eyes and confidently replied that this would greatly affect the taste of the dish. Fong Ning realized that this gave him quite important information and smiled slyly. The cook poured the food into a small plate and said he added different seasoning so the taste might be a little different. Zhao Ying was very interested in trying, so she took the chopsticks first. She ate some and said that although it was a little different from Fong Ning's dish, it was still delicious. The cook also took some food and said that although he had changed one material, it could be beneficial. Fong Ning was pleased with himself. He knew that other chefs would be able to replicate the system's dishes if she gave the recipe. However, the system did not support the guy's joy, and she said that for the time they lost, she would deduct from his rest. Fong Ning crossed his arms over his chest, and he said that he remembered very well that the system was the main one. The guy was in the system space arranged for him. Everything was almost like in the room. The guy reached for the computer block and thought that he would not have guessed that his system was 2-part if he had not watched it. He turned on the computer and remembered the system's words that it would deduct the lost time from his rest. Of course, Fong Ning did not yet have access to the internet, but for the first stage it was not needed. After half a month, the guy moved to his own apartment, which was close to the cafe. Fong Ning was looking forward to how in the future he would be the only one in the world who would taste the best dishes of the system. The food was already on the table when someone knocked on their front door. Zhao Ying stood outside the door with a suitcase in her hands. She said hello and said that they had not seen each other for 2 days. The guy answered the girl that he was not going to share his new apartment with her. And after these words he began to close the door, but Zhao Ying stopped him. She said that's not what she came for. The guy opened the door again and went out into the corridor to the girl, and she revealed that she now lives in a neighboring apartment. Fong Ning was surprised that Zhao Ying was willing to move after him just for food. The girl smelled the delicious aroma of cooked food coming from the guy's apartment, and she pushed him aside to go in. She offered to eat together since he had already prepared lunch. Zhao Ying came to the table and said that after the original, I didn't even want to try a fake. Their new chef was good, but the regulars were disappointed, but new ones continued to be added. Then she looked at the guy and said that she had news. Zhao put a stack of papers on the table. It was a business plan to find investors for their cafe. The girl told the guy that she had already found someone who agreed to cooperate with them. System and Fong Ning silently looked at each other when they heard this. And just a month later they had a huge fancy restaurant in the city center. Fong Ning was happy because this was their 8th successful point this month. He was counting how much they managed to earn from their business this month, and the number was huge. As many as 16 million in just a month. Fong Ning had a hard time believing it, but he was happy. The wall clock showed that it was 7:30, and the system was still in the kitchen. She looked through all the spices she had to choose the best combinations. Fong Ning asked if the system wanted to prepare anything else so that they could open the 9th restaurant. But the system was not interested in this and therefore responded negatively. Then she said that half an hour had already passed and now it was time to train. The system was sitting on the couch and meditating, and Fong Ning decided that even so, things were going well for them. There were some materials lying in front of Fong Ning in the system world. They were bought in the real world, but now they had no problems with money. When a small version of the system appeared next to the guy, Fong Ning boasted that he had done everything he promised. The system told the guy that he now had a live communication function. And as expected, Fong Ning ran to his computer at the same moment. He quickly found himself at his desk and eagerly began to fire up his computer. Using the mouse, the guy searched for the desired icon on the desktop. And finally, he could click on the browser icon and launch the long-awaited internet. Fong Ning was very happy about this. Of course, he waited for this for so long and worked hard. A small copy of the system appeared next to him. She recalled that this function requires a lot of experience on a daily basis. Fong Ning smiled and said that his system is good and they will definitely deal with all the problems. The system only grunted at this and remained sitting on the back of the computer chair. Fong Ning took the computer mouse in his right hand and plunged into the game. He was ready to cry with happiness when, after so much effort, he was finally able to play. There was a meeting at the Chicheng Special Services office to talk about the current situation. 2 months passed after the meteorite fell, and a group of awakened people appeared in the city of Qi. During these 2 months, the service collected data about these people, and were ready to resolve this issue. The man said that it is now difficult to distinguish categories of awakened people, but they can be divided ideologically. The first ones used their powers legally, the latter performed righteous deeds, still others did not know how to earn money, while others relied on their abilities. The man concluded that they should support the first, limit the second, unite the third and fight the fourth. The man switched the slide using an electronic pointer, and a questionnaire appeared behind him. The questionnaire told about Fong Ning, who was classified as first class. Its ability to improve the taste of foods has been noted. The man said that the guy created a special seasoning and with the help of this he became rich. But even after becoming rich, he continues to lead his usual lifestyle and does not bring problems. Therefore, this man was a positive supporter of the social order, from which there were no problems. That is why they had to secretly help the first type of awakened ones with all their might. The Fancha restaurant, as always, was full of people. This has always been the case at this restaurant. The system, in its blonde image, also sat in this restaurant, under the gaze of people. Zhao looked at the guy in confusion. In her thoughts, she called the blonde boy a god. The guy himself was calmly eating at his table and did not suspect that he was being watched. The girl was very glad that the guy could calmly appear in public. Zhao continued to look at the guy with a loving gaze and tried to understand how someone could be so handsome. The girl remembered the boss's appearance, but decided that the blonde was much more beautiful. She decided to forget about Fong Ning and approached the blonde. Zhao walked towards his table. When the girl came closer, she asked if her boyfriend recognized her. A sign appeared in front of Fong Ning to select an option for the development of events. The guy was disappointed when he saw that all the options were stupid again. You could behave with the girl as if you were friends, enemies, or simply ignore her existence. Fong Ning called the system over and said that despite the improvements, it was not changing. He threw his head back and asked why there were no options that didn't sound pretentious. The small version of the system responded that they needed to accumulate rage. Fong Ning imagined that if they were in the game, they could have a scale for rage and after filling it, a super blow would follow. The guy said most of his thoughts out loud, and I asked the system if this was true. The system said that it was indeed approximately as the guy said. Since the system was currently at the 10th level, the divine weapon was in the process of forging. The system said that there is a possibility that a very strong enemy will appear that will not be able to compete with them. Fong Ming was glad that progress was coming so quickly, his system was very diligent. But he wondered whether such a hard-working system would be able to cope with the next enemy. Fong Ming realized that they must fill the rage scale in order to defeat stronger enemies if anything. The system explained that they could spend experience points to master a new skill and move on to stronger techniques, but they needed to release their rage. It turned out that rage can be obtained from people, and at the moment their first rage slot is filled to 70%. The initial rage slot was equal to 1, for every 5 levels another one was given, and they were spent on special skills. Fong Ming smiled when he realized how this whole system worked, and I was surprised that I didn't know about this before. But now he could easily help the system accumulate a lot of rage points. Fong Ming stood up from his seat and asked to let him look at his connections. The system displayed a list on one of his screens, and she asked if that was what he meant. Fong Ming said that those 3 options would not be effective enough and offered to provide his own. The system frowned and was not sure whether to trust the guy with such an important task. The blonde ate all the food he ordered, and now the empty plates lay in a high pile on the table. Zhao Ying felt a little irritated, and I thought that the guy's beauty did not give him the right to consider her empty space. She tried to contact him again, she started to tell him something, but didn't have time to finish. She was interrupted by a loud cry from the side, who called the guy husband. The girl approached the blonde man's table and began asking him who this girl was. The girl bowed her head and looked at Zhao Ying with a question in her eyes. The system notified that anger was growing. The guy replied that he once saved her and it turned out that she works as a waitress in this restaurant. Zhao Ying began to seethe with anger, and the guy invited his wife to eat here together. The girl kissed her husband on the cheek and said that she was very glad that her husband loved her so much. Zhao Ying was in a difficult situation, and she tried to understand how she could be confused with a waitress. The blonde's wife looked at her and asked her not to just stand there, but to bring them some tea. The girl looked around the restaurant and decided that Zhao Ying did not receive a good education. She looked at the waitress and said that the girl could study on her own. Zhao Ying could barely contain her anger, but she was able to thank the guest for her concern. The girl was brought her food, and she took a small piece from the plate. She began to chew the dish that was brought to her to try the taste. After that, she said that although the food didn't look as good as her favorite restaurant, it smelled good. The girl said that the portion was large for her and began to invite the blonde to eat with her. Zhao Ying watched this family idol from afar and trembled with anger. The couple finished and the guy left the restaurant in the arms of the girl, under the evil gaze of Zhao Ying. She stood in the restaurant and clenched her hands into fists to calm down a little. Zhao Ying felt angry, irritated, and a little depressed. Fong Ming laughed hard and believed that Zhao Ying thought too much of herself and now got what she deserved. The guy's part was finished, and the system could deal with the rest itself. So he moved closer to the computer and was finally able to do his business. Fong Ming was playing on the computer when it came time to pay the girl for the performance. Peren asked to wait until he finished playing, but the system did not want to wait. Fong Ming took a break from the game and asked what was so urgent. He saw a notification that he needed to choose a reward for the girl who was pretending to be their wife. It was a calm sunny day outside, and there was a park not far from the restaurant. The couple stopped in this park to resolve the issue of payment. The blonde looked straight into the eyes of the girl opposite, but was in no hurry to say anything. The girl also did not take her eyes off the guy, so she was waiting to receive the award. Thus, they stood in the park opposite each other in tense silence. While the girl looked at the blonde, she remembered how their first meeting went. The girl heard a scream, someone asked that the criminal be stopped. She looked with interest in the direction of the scream and saw what was happening there. And it was at that moment that a blonde man appeared on the roof next to her. The girl turned and watched as the guy deftly caught up with the criminal. She froze in place, carefully examining the guy who quickly ran past. The blonde turned to look at her for just a few seconds. This was enough for their eyes to meet. The girl watched what was happening with wide eyes. So she froze in the center of the street and watched as the guy quickly disappeared somewhere ahead. The girl ran to get to her home as quickly as possible. When she finally arrived, she noticed 2 familiar men inside the courtyard. The girl was very excited and asked if their family had connections with a special department. Now she was standing in the park with this guy, and she said that she was waiting for him to teach her martial arts. The girl crossed her arms over her chest, and she reminded her that he promised to teach her how to fight. Fong Ning tensed and remembered that this was the second option that the system offered. The blonde took out 3 books and handed them to the girl. He asked her to choose one of them. He said that as a fighter for justice, he always keeps his word. The girl was nervous and looked at the blonde with a little suspicion. She carefully read all the names and extended her hand to one of them. The girl decided that the first 2 options looked difficult, so she chose the third. After she took the book, the blonde began to quickly approach her, and she got scared. Someone else's hand suddenly touched her forehead. This was unexpected for the girl, but then she felt as if warm energy was pouring into her body. It seemed to envelop the girl. It felt very strange because the energy seemed to stop in the chest area. After that, the blonde took his hand and the flow of energy stopped. The girl stood opposite and continued to look at the guy. After that, the blonde turned around, leaving the girl alone, and began to leave. She decided that she could trust him. The girl opened the book she took from the guy and looked at the pictures that were inside. The blonde jumped up, "Leave the girl alone," and she thanked him afterwards. And then she again carefully examined the contents of the books that the guy left her. The blonde moved further and further away from the girl, and the system announced that the first rage scale was completely filled. Fong Ning, you were very pleased with yourself when you heard this, and I thought that the anger of 2 women was unimaginable. New cases were all fine until the system turned them out. It was already dark. The men continued to sit at the table and discuss their progress in martial arts. The bespectacled man admired how the family had practiced martial arts for generations. The second man pushed him and was convinced that their family would definitely become famous. The girl heard their conversation and felt herself starting to get angry. She passed not far from the table where the men were sitting. I didn't hear every word they said. She thought that recently there were people everywhere who had awakened their powers. Her family practiced traditional Chinese medicine, but after a special spiritual power appeared, they were able to cure incurable diseases. The girl frowned and looked at her feet. She felt irritated. Her hands clenched into fists from the anger she felt towards the injustice in her family. That's all because family arts were passed on only to men, but the girl believed that she was also worthy. The girl quietly walked up the steps, which I found large closed doors. She was very tired today and wanted to get to her room as quickly as possible. But when she entered the courtyard and was about to go into her room, she heard her name being called. Qian turned around and saw her aunt. The woman said that she had been waiting for her for a long time. The aunt asked the girl why she didn't contact Xiao Zheng. She said that he was not a son and that they had the same last name did not matter. The aunt leaned closer to Qian and said that he was even willing to teach her martial arts as soon as she married him. The woman continued to follow the leaving girl, and convince her that this way she and her family will not need anything. Qian finally reached her door. The aunt saw that the girl was not going to follow her plan. The girl went into her room and tried to close the doors right in front of her aunt, who was outraged by this behavior. Qian remembered the guy and decided that not only was he lazy and ugly, but he also had a mercantile and boring character. The girl closed her eyes and compared that guy with a blonde guy in her head, and although both had flaws, to us the blonde was much better. Qian opened her purse and started looking for a book inside. When she found it, she immediately took it out. She believed that the guy deliberately gave her difficult techniques, but she was still determined to train, especially at night when no one could see her. The blonde stood on the roof and watched Qian, and filling the rage gauge. Fong Ning believed that the girl really had the right to be angry because my reception seemed strange. That technique was different from the usual meditative cultivation method, and it required a person to make quick rebounds when performing it. The girl changed into sportswear and began training in a small courtyard. She took the pose that was indicated in the picture and made jumps. Her hands were under her breasts, as if supporting her from below, and, despite her fatigue, Qian jumped quite high, observing all the techniques. Fong Ning regretted that he could not record the girl's training on video. Then he reminded himself that they had not come here to spy on the girl. He looked at the system and thought that in any case there were fewer ordinary criminals, and they needed these forces. Suddenly the girl heard her name called and looked in surprise towards the doors. Her dad was standing in the aisle, asking what she was doing. He looked around and noticed that it was very dark, so he asked why the lanterns were not on. Qian got nervous and told Dad that she was tired of reading and decided to dance a little. Her dad came closer and said that in any case they would ask her to fix the lights, and they needed to talk. He told the girl that they were having a family meeting again tomorrow. Sipin was surprised that they arranged it again so quickly. The man said that the son of the leader of their clan was going to cooperate with the elders and release a powerful pill. That is why they need funds from their family. They also want to hire a clan member with great inner strength. Her father said that since the time had come, she should participate. The girl was very happy when she found out that her dad did this for her. Xian remembered this guy and was very happy that she could finally participate. Then the girl concentrated and realized that she just needed to pretend that this dance was not special. Her dad closed his eyes and said that this world is changing quickly. Fang Ning and the system continued to watch them from afar while Dad said that it was better for him not to rush into assumptions. Fang Ning asked the system if this person was telling the truth. The system looked at him and replied that it itself did not know this. The system explained how the storage of a person's internal energy works and that it would be difficult to help with a pill. The system also suggested that certain herbs were used to neutralize personal qualities. After the system told him everything it knew on this topic, then she asked the guy why he needed this information. Fang Ning said that he thought later that they had been sitting in place for several days, and he suggested that the system would like to participate in this. The system pondered his words and admitted that it was true, therefore, they decided to keep watch on the roof. Suddenly, a map notification appeared in front of them, showing the location of the incident. And they, too, hastened to leave to capture the criminal. This enemy was like an ant to them, but the system lacked heroic deeds. The next day, Fang Ning and the systems were again on the roof and watching the courtyard from there. This time it was well lit, and there were many people sitting at different tables. Xenia talked cheerfully among themselves about something and ate delicious food. And suddenly a notification appeared on the map about 3 large dangerous targets. And the system headed towards them. Very soon she found 3 guys. Fang Ning encouraged the system while sitting on her shoulder. System jumped from the roof of the building, and the guy suggested to her how to defeat these opponents. He asked if the system wanted to use a long-range weapon, such as a pistol. Fang Ning told the system that being open like this is always effective. But the system was not going to listen to him, because such behavior was not befitting a noble person. Therefore, the very next moment the system landed in front of the 3 criminals to prepare for battle. The blonde stood in front of the criminals, pointed at them and began to say what they were accused of. But none of the guys listened to him to the end. They didn't turn around and started running away. Fang Ning told the system that he warned it about this. Well, they really watched the criminals there. After that, she gave chase, and Fang Ning said that if they can run so fast, then they are unusual people. Very soon the blonde almost caught up with the criminals, and the men talked among themselves that they were being pursued by the same knight. They understood that they could not escape, and he was catching up with them. Therefore, one of the men suggested splitting up. He ordered his friends to run, while he himself was going to detain the blonde. That is why, at the first opportunity, the 3 men split up. Now the man was going to increase his speed so that the knight would follow him. And he hastened to carry out his plan, accelerating to the maximum. Thus, the man ran without stopping for 2 hours. He began to slow down because the chase had gone on for too long and he felt like he had gotten away. The man stopped, he leaned on his legs and tried to catch his breath. It was a long run, and the man felt very tired. The man was forced to start running again when he saw the blonde man appear behind him. He ran away and tried to understand why this guy and how he wouldn't get rid of him and how he even ended up here. When the man decided that he had broken away again, a second later he saw the blonde running after him through the water. The man turned around and screamed. He asked if the guy really wanted to run after him until dawn. The man took out a small glass bottle of pills and poured the only one into his hand. And he threw the empty jar with all his might at his pursuer, and she said that she stole it. However, the blonde did not pay any attention to her and continued to follow the man. He ran away and asked why he was pursuing him if he gave away stolen goods. The man looked at the pill in his hand and realized that giving it away was the only way to escape. So he turned to the blonde and threw a pill at him. The guy rushed to catch the pill, and the man, without wasting time, ran away further. The man jumped over another fence, and he hoped to finally escape from the blonde. He landed carefully on the ground on the other side, and I decided to take a break. He stood up again to catch his breath and thought that now the guy should have left him behind. The man did not have time to rest properly when he heard sounds near him. It was a blonde man who was already approaching him at full speed. The blonde was absolutely serious and had no intention of backing down from his intended goal. The man looked at the approaching guy with fear on his face. He started running away again and asked where the other two had gone. He called and ordered him to come and help him escape from the blonde. But the men were not going to help him. They said that he himself said that the knight would never catch up with him. Therefore, they advised the man not to stop and continue running, whatever you were doing. He cried while he ran away and asked his partners to help him. He was ready to give up his leadership status. But his partners were not going to help him, and resigned themselves to the fact that he would be caught by the Special Affairs Bureau, after which the man heard them drinking because he was a good guy. The man cried and came to the conclusion that he had exhausted the patience of all people, and his luck had left him. He recalled how he always ran away from the teacher while she ran after him with a ruler, and how he ran away in any situation where he could be in danger. But now that he was being chased by someone like the blonde, he couldn't do anything. Fong Ning observed the man and said that he was good at escaping, but he was unlucky to meet the system. He tripped and started to fall. He just wanted to get a level up with the help of a pill. After running for such a long time, his strength was gone and he could no longer run. The man fell right on the road. He realized that the blonde was right behind him. But he couldn't move at all. The man tried to come to terms with the fact that this was his end. He calmed down a little and thought that maybe this ending wasn't so bad. Then he noticed a blonde man in front of him, who was coming closer and closer to him. The man was scared, but all he could do was lie there. The system looked down at him, examining him at the same time. When the guy came very close, he took the man by the t-shirt and began to lift him from the ground. The man tried to talk to the blonde, but it was useless. The man watched as the blonde raised his hand to strike him, and the next moment he was already flying away from the guy. The blow was so strong. The man's body flew to the window of one of the stores, and with a crash it fell right on him and the boxes of apples. The man lost his creation. All his clothes were covered in the remains of apples. There was a lot of crushed fruit around. Fong Ning looked at the man and said that it must have hurt a lot. Then the guy turned his gaze to the system and thought that it must have been angry. The system has never caught anyone for so long. She reached out to the man and took his wallet. Then the blonde opened his wallet and took out several bills. He left them at the apple stand, paid for the destroyed stand, and they left. The man was still sitting under the kiosk covered in apples and was unconscious, when a car drove up to this place and illuminated the man with its headlights. Many cars and people in dark suits appeared on this street. All the men were frowning and extremely serious. They all got out of their cars. A man in a suit approached the unconscious man and began handcuffing him. After this, the man was also shackled on his legs. One of the men said that this man's name was Lu Er, and his nickname was the Flying Squirrel. The men carried the beaten criminals to the car, and two people nearby were watching what was happening from the alley. These people were Lu Er's former partners. One of them was glad that everything worked out, and he asked the man what they should do now that they had escaped from Lu Er and these employees. The man said that this impudent man got what he deserved and now does not cause problems. Nyoshi said he was unable to record the entire chase because their motorcycle ran out of gas. The man said they could make some money for gas when they sold the record. The workers were driving in their cars back to the office. They wondered why the knight chased this man for 4 hours. One of the guys noticed that he was very tired even just watching this chase. The man who was driving said that he expected something like this from the knight. The third man laughed and said that this Lu Er was unlucky to face such a determined opponent. But now old man Zhang finally has fresh blood to work with. Morning came and they arrived at the headquarters of the Chi-Cheng Special Affairs Department. When the car approached the guards, the driver showed them his pass. Seeing the pass, the guards allowed the car into the territory of the rehabilitation center. Lu Er was driving in the car with a bag on his head. He heard someone outside the window constantly repeating numbers. A column of men in identical uniforms ran through the office area. They shouted that they must protect people. The jogging continued, and the man sang a song about enjoying freedom and life. Lu Er was taken out of the car and the bag was removed from his head. Well, his arms and legs were still handcuffed. The man thought that as soon as he got out of here, he would find the knight and take revenge on him. Lu Er thought that the rehabilitation here did not consist of the most pleasant methods. Suddenly, a man appeared in front of them, and his entourage greeted him and called him Director Zhang. They introduced him to a new student, who was Lu Er, and the director adjusted his glasses with interest. Lu Er looked back at the running men and realized that after graduating from here, they would lose themselves. He didn't want this to happen to him. Director Zhang asked what happened to the guy's face. Was he really the knight's next victim? The workers confirmed the director's guess with smiles, and they said that running away from the knight was a bad idea. But Director Zhang believed that the knight also needed re-education, and they are in vain allowing him to do whatever he wants. One of the workers did not entirely agree with this, and he said that they don't even know approximately who he is. And the second worker said that the knight even left money for the destroyed stall. Director Zhang lowered his head and said that the knight had caught 723 criminals in the past 2 months. And during this time there were 8 cases of overprotection of the knight. The director asked if I remembered everything correctly. And the employee smiled at him when he said that the director had an excellent memory. And that is why the director at the case of such a person should be transferred to the Special Investigations Department. The man said that the Department of Truth had already assessed his abilities and found him not very useful, but Director Zhang was sure that someday they would regret today's decision. He told the workers that he was taking Lu Er, and they could return for him in 3 months. The men bowed to the director and thanked him for his efforts. After that, the workers left the center, and Director Zhang went inside. Lu Er walked awkwardly behind him. The chains on his legs would make it very difficult for him to walk. Lu Er tried to understand why the chains were so short and how people even walked in them. Director Zhang looked back and saw how hard Lu Er was following him. Therefore, he created some strange clot in his palm. And then he threw it towards Lu Er, and with his help he broke the chains on the man's shackles. Lu Er looked at his freed hands and couldn't believe it. Now it has become clear why this particular person occupies the main place in the rehabilitation process. Director Zhang smiled as he watched the man and let him live normally for a little while longer. Fong Ming held in his hands a tablet that actually sealed the body's energy. The guy was familiar with this feeling, because the system was constantly changing his body for righteous deeds. He brought it closer to his face and realized that no one knew what effect the pill would have. Fong Ming remembered Qian's father saying that the pill would be freely available, but in fact this was not the case. It was too expensive and it was unlikely that anyone would be able to buy it. The guy tensed when he suddenly heard someone laugh. It was very strange. He looked around, trying to control himself, but I continued to hear a voice that came from nowhere. Fong Ming was very scared and shouted loudly that there was a ghost here. The guy was trembling all over and crawled under the table in search of shelter. He asked him not to come near him. Fong Ming decided that these voices were coming from the direction of the blacksmith's house. He plucked up his courage and decided to go check what it was. He left his room and ran to the forge. The guy was scared. He opened the door and began to quickly look around. After he found nothing, the guy hurried to hide in a small shelter. There he summoned the panel and began to quickly type something on it. After that, a small copy of him appeared on the system's shoulder, and he noticed that dawn would soon come. Fong Ming asked the system if they were being pursued, and the system answered him negatively. The guy breathed out a sigh of relief and thought that it was very good that he was scared in vain. But then the system smiled easily and said that they were not persecuted in this world. Fong Ming grabbed the system and fearfully began to ask what she was talking about. The system turned to the guy and told him that a wandering spirit can only confuse a person, so there was no point in attacking. Fong Ming excitedly asked the system when this ghost would be able to harm a person. The system said that it depends on many factors, but if we take into account their case, then about 2 months. Fong Ming glanced at the wandering spirit next to them, and he asked if this would bring them trouble in the future. Fong Ming learned that there were indeed ghosts and demons in the world. The guy exhaled and admitted that, despite his lifestyle, he also worried about the world. The wandering spirit was angry that she was being ignored, and crept closer to the system. The spirit had female outlines. She said that he wouldn't be able to get rid of her like the rest of the losers. After this, her body began to have clearer outlines, and she was going to attack the blonde from behind. The blonde stood with his back to the ghost, which flew to attack them. The wandering spirit was right behind them. Her eyes glowed red and there was dark smoke all around. Fong Ming watched in horror as he was about to attack them, but the system remained calm. System used her new technique and a golden dragon appeared from her hand. The blonde, with one movement of his hand, launched this dragon straight at the wandering spirit. It was a very strong attack that hit the girl and she was unable to attack. From the side, the blow in the form of this dragon looked like a very bright glow. The man who saw this from the balcony rushed to run from there just in case. The system balanced on one leg while it stood on the antenna. There was darkness all around. But within a moment the clouds began to clear and the sun began to illuminate the city. Fong Ning was happy to watch the wandering spirit's spell dissipate. After this battle, as usual, a report about it appeared. It turned out that the ghost's name was Zhu Sanmei. Fong Ning saw that defeating him only earned them 50 points, and I understood why the system didn't want to fight. And then the guy asked the system why it spent a whole charge on the ghost, although it did not plan to fight. The system said that Fong Ning was very good at getting on people's nerves, so she decided to test her skills. They moved to the blacksmith's house to continue their conversation there. Fong Ning sat dissatisfied on the floor and thought that they hated him precisely because they needed rage. The system said that they now have enough points to fill the special ability of their celestial weapons, and she asked which function would attract more opponents. The guy said it should be eternal youth and immortality. This is what people desired from the beginning of time. The system agreed that the guy was right, but they didn't have the right components, so it wasn't an option. Fong Ning folded his arms and said that then either longevity or extreme strength remains. The system agreed that it would be easy, but they could not grant them extraordinary power. Fong Ning agreed that if their power increased sharply, then there would be no point in creating weapons. Therefore, they settled on the longevity option. The system said it would cope within a few days. The system asked what would be the best way to make a weapon, and the guy suggested adding Western and Eastern elements. And since gold has always been combined with treasure since ancient times, it was necessary to make it gold. The system listened to the guy and agreed with his idea, after which it began creating weapons. At first glance, it was an ordinary area. If a loud scream was not heard from one of the houses, there was a small piece of a wandering spirit in this house. The man was very angry that he spent 3 years on the spirit, and now it was almost destroyed. Zhu Sanmei said that she was very sorry, but the enemy was very strong. She said that she had never seen such a skill, and it was impossible to avoid. The man was angry that Feng Miao had already given him his information about the knight's abilities. He turned to the spirit and asked why everything turned into a fight if he ordered to just follow him. Zhu Sanmei admitted that she wanted to test his skills for her master. When the man heard this, he screamed. He angrily asked why she did something she wasn't asked to do. After this, the man calmed down a little and told the girl that he would treat her only in 3 days. The man approached the box and began to close the spirit in it. He said she had better follow orders. The man slammed the lid and heard that Zhu Sanmei might not last that long. But, despite this, the man did not take any action to save the spirit. The man thought about everything that had happened and went down the stairs. He approached a small altar, which was set up in a small, poorly lit room. And the man began to prepare the altar for the ceremony. He lit the incense sticks and bowed with them before the altar. After that, he lit the candles and put the sticks in their place. When the small ceremony was completed, the image of a guy appeared in front of the man. The guy asked what success the man had, and Geeky admitted that there were none. The smile disappeared from the guy's face, and he asked what was causing this. The man stood in front of the image of the guy on his knees and listened to him carefully. The man bowed and said that his spiritual servant had been fatally attacked, which would slow down their plans. The guy told the man that his spiritual servant was a very qualified specialist. And then he said that ordinary awakened individuals could not defeat the spirit. Geeky said that his spiritual servant acted of her own free will and caused conflict. The guy reassured him, saying that this was a common problem for spiritual servants. They constantly do what they like too. The man bowed to him again and offered him several compliments. The guy laughed and said that Geeky was really good at giving compliments. After that, a vision appeared in front of the man, which was intended for his spiritual servant. The guy told Geeky that he must treat her fairly in order to remain a fair person. The man sat on his knees and promised that he would remember his master's instructions. The guy said that the truth department has already thrown down the cobwebs, so it's time for them to say goodbye. Finally, he asked Geeky to be careful and not give in to greed. The man bowed for the last time. After the guy's silhouette disappeared, he took the tablet into his own hands. He looked at her joyfully. The man was amused by the guy's words, but he had to play along with him. Because he had many advantages in collaborating with this person. Fong Ning and the system were sitting not far from the blacksmith's house. They didn't talk to each other. A ringing sound could be heard from the house, because the sword inside was forged independently. While they were waiting, everyone was thinking about something different, and they didn't even look at each other. Fong Ning was terribly bored, sitting like this and waiting. The guy was upset that he wasn't even allowed to play to somehow pass the time. So he decided to take out his phone and scroll through it, looking at the recent news. The news said that all of Japan was covered in fog for 3 days, and authorities issued a warning not to visit Japan. Fong Ning thought that it was quite strange that there was chaos everywhere, but his city was absolutely calm. After that, the guy left the phone and lay down relaxed. He thought that staying at home wasn't so bad. All he had to worry about was eating and playing, and that suited him. Meanwhile, Principal Zhang was telling the students that they still had a lot to learn from Fong Ning, because he used his ability to earn money legally and, unlike them, sits at home. Lu Er did not appreciate such an example from the director, and he considered this guy a pathetic coward and a homebody. The director said that they are here to realize their mistakes and to understand that their abilities do not place them above others. After that, he suddenly turned to the new kid in their class. The director asked him to stand up and share his abilities and crimes with the others. Lu Er stood up from his seat and began to say that he was wrong, although in fact I don't think so. He said that he should have used his speed not to commit theft. Instead, he should have used it for peace and joined the national team to lead their country to the Olympics. He said that he completely repented of his actions and changed for the better. And he promised that he would be a better person from now on, although in reality I just wanted to leave this place. Director Zhang said that soon only awakened individuals will be able to participate in competitions. Therefore, Lu Er had to train harder if he wanted to participate. The man nodded and said that he would work hard not to let the country down. Principal Zhang said that then they would end the lesson there, heading towards the exit. But before leaving, the director was tasked with writing an essay on the topic, "What is true happiness?" The entire class responded in unison to Principal Zhang with agreement. The director stopped when he heard that everyone agreed with him. After that, he said that those who performed well could call their families. Lu Er was happy that he could finally call his traitor. In one of the areas there was a cry that the second brother was going to run away from there. Lu Er's former friends talked to him on the phone. The man said that the preparation was not finished. And Lu Er was very angry and said that from now on they are no longer brothers. The man on the other end of the line asked how many more times he was going to break their brotherhood. He said they weren't able to save him, but they were able to get a decent recording of what happened. Lu Er was promised to send a video, and 20 minutes later he called his partner again. He apologized to them for thinking badly of them and asked them to send him money. It was lunchtime at their rehab center, therefore, the dining room was full of people. Lu Er took some food for himself that was sold in their cafeteria, and he ate his food little by little with pleasure. But then the screen suddenly started showing various delicious and seemingly delicious dishes. Most of the men in the room turned their gaze to the TV. The screen showed Fong Ning eating various dishes with great pleasure. Lu Er recognized him as the guy the director mentioned so often. Because of this, the man became very angry, because even when they ate they continued to receive them. Lu Er promised himself that when he left this center he would have the same luxurious table. The guy was sitting at the table, his rage filled with unfamiliar names. All 3 scales were completely filled. Fong Ning cut himself another piece of meat, which smelled simply wonderful. He put it in his mouth and enjoyed its taste with pleasure. When the guy finished eating, he thought that those guys from the re-education department were angry with him again. Workers from the re-education department hung cameras in his restaurant. Fong Ning allowed them to do this so that they could draw a clear line between and the night. A nice addition to this was that it helped replenish your rage resources. Therefore, such a step played well into the hands of both sides. While the guy was eating, he thought it would be nice to exercise. Fong Ning finished his meal, leaned back on his chair and stroked his stomach, and was very glad that he had eaten well. The entire course of his nutrition cost from $70,000 to $100,000, and if you include breakfast and 3 meals a day, then all $300,000. The guy looked at his hand and thought that the system had set up such a diet to strengthen the body. At the rehabilitation center, it's time for training. They were ordered not to stop, otherwise they might not get their lunch. Lu Er diligently did push-ups along with everyone else. He was already quite tired. When suddenly one of the workers called him to take the money. Lu Er the suitcase that was in the guard's hands and couldn't believe that there was only money in that suitcase. He heard a conversation between 2 men who were doing push-ups not far from him. They discussed how they spent all their money on better food, but now they have no one to ask. Lu Er went to collect his money, and he was glad that he had such wonderful brothers outside. The man was already mentally anticipating how he would be able to eat normally. Lu Er approached the designer and loudly reported to him. After that, the instructor allowed Lu Er to take his suitcase for himself. Lu Er sat down on the ground to quickly open the suitcase, and a whole crowd of spectators gathered around him. With deft and quick movements, the man opened the suitcase on the sports ground. However, inside the suitcase he was disappointed. Almost the entire space was occupied by a warm jacket and a couple of bills lay on top. Lu Er wanted to cry out of disappointment that he was only given 1,000 yuan. And what was even more frustrating was that the canteen was too expensive and he wouldn't even have enough for one dish. The house in which Mada and Nyoshi lived was no different from all the other houses. Nyoshi admired that the men not only gave money to Lu Er, but also put on winter clothes. The guy said that even though they lost their parents and Sanmei, they still had a boss. Mada said that this center will take care of his nutrition, but most likely will not think about things. Nyoshi agreed with the man that it was better not to joke with the cold in the city of Chi. Nyoshi said that now that they have bought so many clothes for Lu Er, they won't be able to buy meat. Mada said that they would not be able to commit a crime, because the night is still waiting for them. Therefore, it was decided to look for some clean work. The knight stood on the roof of one of the buildings and carefully examined the map of the city. Unfortunately for him, all the criminals decided to lie low, and he could not gain experience. The system really wanted to find the same valuable criminals as last time. Fong Ming sat in his small room in the system space at the computer. He could easily play the game as much as he wanted. He looked for a weapon he liked and saw that it cost at least $3,000. Suddenly he received a message asking where he was making money now. President Chow, one of his chain's franchisees, wrote to him, so he started typing a reply. President Chow wrote to him about the miracle cure and that he was invited to a meeting. Fong Ming realized that he was being invited to dinner by the same Qi family. Fong Ming told the system his plan and asked how he felt about it. And the system liked that the guy had already considered the circumstances of the injury and he was proud of his progress. Fong Ming understands that they will need to go there in his real form to buy medicine, but he understood that they would need some kind of replacement for his body in case of unforeseen danger. The system listened to everything he said and silently thought about how to get out of the situation. Afterwards the system said that the idea of creating a mechanical doll suits them. They were in the system world, and Fong Ming was looking at an exact copy of himself in a white suit. In front of the guy stood a mechanical doll, in which such things as hair, nails and even the structure of dandruff were repeated. Fong Ming smiled at his copy and thought that he turned out to be a wonderful handsome man. This doll had perfect camouflage, long-term control and average speaking abilities. The system appeared in Fong Ming's room, and the guy said that he was delighted with the result. Since his blood was used to create this doll, he asked the system where it came from. The mechanical doll has disappeared. The system explained that since his health was good, they were keeping some in case of serious injury. Fong Ming praised the system for such foresight and said that he himself had not even thought about it. The system was proud of itself and said that now his considerations are more complete than the guy's. And after that, the system said that it also took a piece of liver, intestines, some pulmonary structures and one kidney. Fong Ming understood why he did not feel an increase in strength despite eating nutritious food. The system admitted that it was able to take only a little tissue from the heart, and did not touch the brain at all. The system also considered taking one of the guy's testicles, but since the system knew how reverently people treat this body, it decided to ask first. Fong Ming asked why the system didn't ask when it took other parts of his body. The system said it noticed that the guy was mostly a recluse and only spent time at the cyber cafe. And since the guy doesn't use this organ anyway, the system could start a backup. After these words, the system asked the guy if this suited him. Fong Ming looked quite gloomy and, gathering his strength, began to speak. He said that as a former programmer, he had to thank the system for its efforts. The system was glad to hear praise in its direction and was proud of itself. The system said that because the guy eats well every day, he feels good even with one kidney. Fong Ming became gloomy again. Now the intentions of the system became clear to him. Of course, his actions made quite a lot of sense, but it was hard for the guy to accept it. He decided that he couldn't let the system do whatever it wanted to his body. Fong Ming asked if the system was afraid that changes to parts of his body would affect internal processes. He said that he was worried that this could lead to a decline in his abilities. However, the system did not allow him to finish and said that this was impossible. The system explained that strength grows not outside, but inside the tissues, plus, he can always return the organs to their place. Fong Ning asked if she really stored all his organs in the system space. He asked the system why he had not seen them before and whether it was safe there. The system explained that it had created a separate zone for this, in which time does not move, so the organs will remain fresh. After this, the system again asked to take one of the testicles to freeze. The system was close enough to the desired organ and asked if the guy agreed. He shouted that he did not agree so loudly that the room they were in began to shake. Fong Ning thought that they would not solve this matter with ordinary conversations. Then he looked down and realized that one of his testicles was missing. He covered his groin and asked the system how he would have children now. Fong Ning fell to the floor and began to cry. He was upset because he didn't agree. The system still took his testicle. The system said it had informed him, but was not going to listen to his opinion. And after that she told the guy that losing one testicle would not affect his male characteristics in any way. Fong Ning exhaled sadly and almost resigned himself to the fact that he would not be able to return his testicle. But then he came up with a brilliant idea that could help him get a part of himself back. He asked the system if it remembered the original purpose for which they created the doll. The system only thought about not touching his visible organs and forgot that penetrating vision exists. And thus, someone might associate Fong Ning with a knight because of this flaw. The system convinced him that as long as the knight was not exposed, there would be no problem with this. Fong Ning asked what they would do if there was a person with keen eyesight there. The system opened its eyes wide when it heard this, because it had not considered such a scenario. But then she frowned again and asked to stop talking nonsense. If there was such a person there, they would not have complete evidence. Fong Ning heard the system's tone become more dull, and I thought it was strange. She seemed to have emotions. Ultimately, the system gave in and agreed to return everything back. The system was upset because it spent a lot of time on this, and now it's all in vain. The system promised Fong Ning that it would eventually get his consent and it would happen again. Then the system transferred the missing organ to them and returned it to its owner. Fong Ning felt relieved when his testicle returned to him. The guy suddenly realized something and called the system. He told her that they had not wasted time, but had learned a useful skill. The system asked with interest what benefits this could give them. Fong Ning asked the system how long it took to transfer a body part into the system space. The system thought for a moment, and she answered that everything happens very quickly in seconds, or maybe milliseconds. Fong Ning smiled when he heard this and said that it was very cool. The guy thought they could use this to move his body in case of a life-threatening situation. The system listened to Fong Ning's suggestion, and after that they acquired a new skill. He was at a low level and so far could only protect them from open attacks. The system told Fong Ning that they had the ability to raise the level of this ability. And if they succeed, then this skill can become the most useful, and serve them as absolute protection. This technique transferred only those organs that they wanted to strike, so the guy asked why not move it completely. The system explained to him that the only organ that is dangerous to transfer is his brain. The guy agreed that in this case it would not be possible to move it and became serious. Fong Ning was glad that they had a trump card in case of a serious injury, as long as the head was not injured. The system reviewed the guy and agreed that this skill was very useful to them. She didn't really want to admit it, but her master was smarter than it seemed at first glance. After that, the system turned to Fong Ning, drawing his attention to itself. The system recalled that their doll was only capable of fooling ordinary people and ordinary tracking technology. But Fong Ning said that they shouldn't worry about it. This will not give them any serious problems. The system wanted to say something else that she was worried about, but the guy didn't let her finish. Fong Ning said that he came up with a brilliant technique and thinks that he should be rewarded for it. The system flew closer to the guy, and asked what he needed. Fong Ning asked if the system could apply its knowledge to create a pair of artificial legs. The system turned away from the guy and asked if he really wanted to become a cyborg in the future. But Fong Ning was not in the mood to lose any part of his body, unless the system does it without his knowledge. The guy asked to simply answer whether it is possible to make artificial legs or not. The system said it was possible, however, if they are for another person, they will take a lot of energy. Fong Ning knew that this would cost a lot, but he understood that this was his only chance to persuade the system. Because any other time she would never agree to do this. Therefore, the guy, with all his determination, declared that he wanted to receive the award. The system glanced at him, and the guy asked to secretly attach the legs of another person. The small house was located on the outskirts of Chi City. It was quiet and dark around. There was a small lamp in the courtyard of the house that helped illuminate the area. There was a blanket on the floor and some vegetables on it. The man in the stroller was slowly heading there, making a lot of effort. When he finally got to the place with the vegetables, he reached for a tomato. The vegetables were lying on the floor, and it was difficult for the man to reach them on his own, but he still tried his best to get it. Fong Ning watched this man from the bushes not far from the house. The system asked the guy if this was the person for whom they were here. She also said that they would need the man's blood for the legs to take root. Fong Ning intended to finish this quickly, given the system's capabilities, it was easy. But then they noticed a woman coming out of the house. She called the man and asked what he was doing in the yard again. The woman saw a tomato in the man's hands, and she asked him to let her take care of him. But the man told her that everything was fine and that she was going through enough difficulties because of him. The woman smiled at him and told him not to talk nonsense. She lived a great life next to him. She began to cry because of the injustice of the world, and she said that he didn't deserve this. Fong Ning looked at this from his hiding place and also could not hold back his tears. The system asked if they were ready to do this right now, as planned. But the guy asked to wait a little and began to wipe away his tears. The system said that he was very fickle and asked if these people were his parents. Fong Ning noticed that he was 28 years old this year, and the woman was under 40. Meanwhile, the woman told the man that their savings were enough to order him dentures. The man turned to her and asked where they got the money from. The girl told him that all this time one student, who was helped by a man, had been sending them money. Recently the amounts have increased, and they have paid off all their debts and can now save for dentures. The girl admitted that she did not talk about it because she was afraid that the man would give the money. The man said that all the people he taught had already graduated from universities and doubted that they could send money. He asked the girl to return the money if they had problems. The woman said that she didn't believe it at first either, but she had a photograph of him. She brought a photo and gave it to the man in the stroller. The photo showed little Fong Ning. The man looked at it and saw the signature in the corner, and then recognized the guy. He remembered the day when he first met this boy. It was a long time ago. It was winter and the man was driving a truck along the highway. But the man had never been to this area before and could not find his way. He saw a guy walking alone somewhere along the road. So the man stopped and got out of the car. He approached the guy and asked him to show him the way. The boy did not look very healthy, but he said that the driver would see the village after 10 minutes of driving. Fong Ning wanted to tell him that there was a good hotel at the entrance, but he couldn't finish because he started sneezing. The man noticed that, despite the intense cold, the boy was lightly dressed. So he returned to his truck and asked the guy to wait. The man took out a warm jacket from the car and threw it over the guy's shoulders. The man smiled at the boy and said that he was leaving him the jacket as a thank you. The boy looked very surprised, as if no one had done this for him before. The man looked at the photo with a smile and said that the guy was the same only without a jacket. He wanted to say something about good deeds, but was hit in the neck. The girl was scared and did not understand what happened, but very quickly she also received a blow. Thus, the man and the girl found themselves unconscious in the courtyard of their house. Fong Ning was angry because the system once again did not listen to him. The system was in the guy's body, and she said that everything began to drag on. And since they wanted to get this over with quickly, they had to hurry. The guy approached the man in the stroller and sat down on his knees in front of him. The only source of light was still the old lamp above the porch of the house. And while no one could notice them, the system installed artificial legs for the man. When she finished, the man's legs were in place. Fong Ning is very pleased. The system said that they had to spend quite a lot of vital energy and experience. But then a notification appeared that shocked the system and the guy. The notice said that the guy received a morality module and permanent power points. After they finished helping the man, they returned to the system world. Fong Ning asked why such a scale even existed in the world. And the system tried to force the guy to remember if there was anyone else he wanted to thank. Fong Ning was angry and said that in his case this was impossible. The memory of someone taking care of him in the cold winter was the fondest memory of his childhood. Fong Ning tried to understand why the system was so happy about this discovery, so he asked about it. The blonde rubbed his hands in anticipation and said that you usually have to accumulate fame in order to unlock the reputation module. After that, they had to become a hero and raise the system level to 50, and they managed to get it now. The only downside was that morale points were much harder to earn. Fong Ning asked what would happen if he used hits from the rage scale and the moral scale at the same time. The system happily said that the blow would be, not just increased in power. The morality scale works for those who have even the slightest bit of evil intentions, and the spirits will be easily defeated. Since Fong Ning was afraid of spirits, he would be very happy about this fact. The guy finally felt relieved that he had solved a problem that had been bothering him for a long time. He turned to the computer and said that now he could play and read novels in peace. The guy was very pleased and smiled widely, and the system watched him with displeasure, but was silent. The system thought that after this the guy would stop fooling around and come to his senses. Therefore, she reminded the guy about the Chi family holiday to which they were invited. Fong Ming quickly looked at the blondes and said that now they don't have to be there. The system realized that he sadly wanted to go there and get the medicine to try to help his benefactor. So the system snapped its fingers and turned off the internet. Since Fong Ning's game depended on the internet, he was unable to continue playing. The guy was very angry because he was about to capture the whole city. Fong Ning looked at the system angrily, hoping that it would return his internet. But since the system didn't even look at him, the guy gave up. He turned away from the computer and said that he would go out of his way to appear in society. The system was satisfied with this answer, and it still returned the internet to the guy. Fong Ning looked back at the screens and saw that the connection to the game had been restored. During this time the guy had already lost. People in the chat decided that the girl had turned off his internet, and Fong Ning read the comments with dissatisfaction, and thought that it would be better if it really was a girl. As evening fell, the guy arrived at the meeting place, and straightened his tie before entering the building. He had seen enough of the people around him, and I thought that I should have taken Zhaoying with me. When he invited her with him, she said that she could not because she was studying English. The girl was determined. She wanted their cafe to become an international chain, so she listened intently to the text in English on her headphones. She tried to translate what the guy said, but she couldn't do it so quickly. Fong Ning was confident that the girl would cope within a month, and I thought that he himself learned English quickly enough. He entered a luxurious building and handed the employee his invitation. He bowed politely to him and asked the guy to move on. Fong Ning well done in a very expensive suit, so people expressed their admiration for him. He found himself in a restaurant hall full of people. Very soon after he appeared there they called him and greeted him. The guy turned around and saw in front of him a couple of a young girl and an adult man. This man was President Zhao, and they shook hands in greeting. Fong Ning turned his gaze to the girl next to the man and asked him who it was. The president introduced his daughter Lu Yao. He said she turned 20 this year. President Zhao threw his arm over the guy's shoulder and said that he was much better than most people his age. The girl looked at the guy and smiled sweetly at him, then she politely said hello. Fong Ning blushed with embarrassment, but greeted the girl in return. President Zhao said that she arranged everything so that they would sit at the same table. All the people approaching were in expensive suits, and the waiters were serving wine. President Zhao sat next to the guy and said that he was very happy to meet Fong Ning this evening. They spoke politely to each other, and the guy thought that the man really knew how to behave in society. Their conversation was interrupted by someone else's voice. He spoke unpleasantly about Fong Ning, which attracted the attention of their table. The guy looked at the man who said such things, and I saw a young arrogant guy in front of me. Fong Ning became gloomy. He didn't like this man at all. The guy was sitting in the system space and decided to look at Lu Yao's reaction through the monitor. The girl sat quietly and did not even pay attention to the guy who appeared. Fong Ning thought that the girl looked good and getting married was not a very bad idea, especially if he can continue the lifestyle he leads now. The system took a break from meditation and said that marriage mode would be unlocked after level 100. President Zhao named the guy Chi Tao. He said that he couldn't treat guests like that. Chi Tao said that he can say this if the person is useless. Fong Ning was surprised that this person was being called useless when the rehabilitation center was making an example of him. He looked at this arrogant guy and wondered what he had done. President Zhao said that the department maintains peace throughout the country, so the Qi clan need not interfere. Chi Tao looked at the president and asked if he really wanted to take a chef as his son-in-law. President Zhao said that the guy is an awakened person and an experienced gourmet. However, Chi Tao continued to ridicule him and said that even if he was a chef, he would not be able to create a masterpiece. President Zhao and his daughter felt uncomfortable when they listened to such words from Chi Tao. Fong Ming looked at this guy and wondered who he was if he allowed himself to get involved in other people's conversations so brazenly. The system appeared next to him and said that they could not receive much anger this evening if their scales were not filled. Fong Ming was dissatisfied with the fact that they were being humiliated, and the system did not even spare him. However, the system said that being insulted is even good for them. Fong Ming was sure that this person was worth quite a lot of experience points, and the system confirmed his words. She showed him the map, and the guy was marked with a huge bright orange sphere. However, due to the fact that she was not red, it was against the rules of the system to interact with him. Fong Ming realized that the guy had done bad things, but he could not apprehend the criminal if he was not in the process of committing a crime. After Fong Ming thought about this, he realized that this was all like a game. He asked the system if a person attacked him, would it be considered a threat. The system seriously replied that no matter who threatens him, he immediately becomes enemy number one. A grin appeared on the guy's face, and he ordered the system to closely monitor the map. After this, Fong Ming began to attract the attention of President Zhao and Chi Tao. He took a few steps forward, and then began to fall into the hands of the president. Fong Ming was lying on the floor, and President Zhao was trying to revive him. Lu Yao looked at him worriedly, and her father tried to find out if the guy was okay. Fong Ming said that it was very offensive when he was insulted for no reason. His hands were shaking and he asked to be sent to the hospital as soon as possible because he needed to see a doctor. Chi Tao didn't care about this performance, and President Zhao called for help. And at that moment, when Chi Tao left the guy in trouble, he began to glow red on the map. The system noticed this and got seriously angry at this terrible guy. The ambulance was quickly driving through the city at night to the hospital. Fong Ming was riding inside her. He had an oxygen mask on his face. He was also connected to a machine that showed his heartbeat, as well as all other necessary medical devices. Doctors examined the guys and tried to understand why a healthy man fainted. President Zhao and his daughter were in the ambulance with the guy. Doctors thought the shock could have been caused by an underlying heart condition, and the guy listened to them gloomily. After that, a joyful system appeared next to him and quickly began to ask how he was able to do this. The guy smiled and said that he was sure that the system had never looked deeper into the rules. He asked to give him control over the body for a while, and the doctors continued to examine him. President Zhao was upset for the guy and thought that he had apparently never been in such a situation. And Lu Yao hoped that everything would be okay with him. This was the first time someone fainted because of her. Meanwhile, the evening organized by the Qi family continued as if nothing had happened. Chi Tao stood in the corner talking to one of the waiters. When Chi Yi approached him, he called Chi Tao's name, attracting his attention. He said that he was informed about what happened, and he asked how things really were. Chi Tao said that nothing special happened. He came over to exchange a few words, but the cook fainted. Chi Yi told the guy that he didn't care how big of a deal he was. The guy knew perfectly well the real nature of his interlocutor. These words angered Chi Tao. He shouted that he would not be afraid of anyone because of this. But Chi Yi said that no matter how worthless he thinks other people are, if he is here, then he is a guest. Chi Tao listened to the fact that he should treat the guests with respect, and then began to speak calmly. But soon he started shouting and told Master Chi not to forget that if it weren't for his grandfather, there would be no medicine. Chi Yi thought tensely that the guy himself had nothing to do with this, but remained silent. Fong Ming was brought to the hospital and put into a ward so that he could rest and recover. In the system world, the system was already eager to hear how the guy was able to turn that person into a red dot. Fong Ming sat opposite the non-blondes in the chair. I noticed that the system was not so excited even after the opening of the morality scale. The system said that with this technique they could easily raise the monsters they needed. Fong Ming admitted that when he called them worthless, he literally attacked their personality. The system did not fully understand where the threat was, because if attacked, it could easily defeat it. The guy looked intensely at the system and realized that it really didn't understand. He moved closer to the blonde and said that the guy tried to kidnap their bride and called him useless. And this man had enormous potential, so he could easily cripple them when he became stronger. Fong Ming said that the system would use low-level bosses to help him level up. However, if they are attacked by monsters with great strength, they will have a hard time. But the system still didn't understand how the guy changed color. Fong Ming laughed and said that this was all because the system did not understand hidden settings at all. Therefore, only the guy himself could use them for the purposes they needed. The system was surprised when it heard that he did it through obsession. Fong Ning that due to paranoia, his psyche sees real evidence, which forces the system to make Chi Tao an enemy. I listened to his explanation and realized that it made sense. The blonde fell silent and began to diligently think about something, and the guy thought that the system really wasn't very smart. Fong Ning really had a mania, but not persecution at all, but playing games and reading novels. The guy became serious and thought that they would actually be better off getting rid of Chi Tao, otherwise it could be a problem. I received a notification saying that the obsession had intensified 3 more times, then it would remain forever. The guy looked at the blonde, who was still thinking about something. Fong Ning decided to call him and asked if he still underestimated the power of novels. The blonde continued to look serious and thoughtful, and he just chuckled in response. After which the system was forced to find out that there was a huge gap between their intellectual abilities. The guy learned that the system had made a difficult decision, and he wondered what it meant. The system said that from now on, whenever any problem arises, she will allow the guy to deal with her. Fong Ning felt embarrassed that the system called this a really difficult decision. The system allowed him to do whatever he wanted in the cyber cafe as long as it gave him more ideas from games and novels. Fong Ning looked down at the blonde and asked if he was sure about this. Suddenly the guy won't have time to solve their problems. The system's response was quite simple. In this case, she will simply turn off the internet. The guy was outraged and asked what if he simply couldn't solve some problem. However, the system's response remained the same, it would simply disconnect the internet connection. Fong Ning thought that this would be cruel and asked what the blonde would do then. The blonde confidently answered him that he would raise monsters and train. The guy tensed when he heard about monsters and training. I wondered if this was all he could do. The guy remembered that day with the meteorite, when he fell and lost consciousness. He was playing some bad video game. Most likely, this system came from that not very good game. The system showed the map and noticed that the Chi Tao point was almost black. The system asked if they were really going to continue to just wait. Fong Ning said that this guy was an unusual target, so they needed to gather more information. Therefore, the system decided to turn off the internet so that the guy would not be distracted while he came up with a brilliant plan. Fong Ning was dissatisfied and started shouting at the system because he needed the internet to collect information. The system looked at him and said that all he had to do was ask the blonde. A window appeared next to the blonde after he snapped his fingers. Fong Ning looked at all this and said that the system was simply terrible. The system noticed that someone sent a message. It was from a hummingbird and offered information about Chi Tao. They read the message and looked at each other as they decided what they would do about it. The knight quickly moved through the night city to Chi Tao's location. When he got to the right place, he saw the guy doing something with the girl. Chi Tao held his hand over the girl's chest, and she looked like she was ill. If you look at the girl's face closer, you could see that there was blood coming from her mouth. Chi Tao saw the knight and was glad that he finally came to him. The guy left the girl's body lying on the ground and began to come closer to the knight. Chi Tao decided that Fong Ning hired the knight to take revenge on him. The guy became gloomy and asked the knight if he really considers revenge a righteous deed. Fong Ning said that this man was just teasing and trying to piss off the knight. The system agreed with the guy. Fong Ning asked if she could handle it. The system said that he was only threatening her with words, and Fong Ning wanted her to let him continue playing. The blonde decided to let the guy go, but on the condition that he would appear if needed. Fong Ning happily returned to the system world and sat down at the computer. Chi Tao became angry when he saw that his words had no effect, and he started shouting that he didn't like it when the victim died without emotions. He said that this was no fun at all, and spirits began to appear from his back. His eyes glowed blue and he released all the spirits from his back, and he said that the knight would be the same. These silhouettes left Chi Tao's body. They flew off to attack the knight. They circled around the blonde and were about to attack, but then changed direction. They flew behind him and lifted 2 men in suits into the air. After that, they released them to the ground and the men fell with a roar. The knight's face showed no emotion. Because of this, it was impossible to understand what he was thinking. After this, they began to cough violently and blood began to flow from their mouths. The men looked at their palms, which were dripping blood as they coughed. They were very scared because blood from the mouth clearly couldn't be a good thing. Chi Tao was delighted when he saw the frightened faces of these men. He shouted that people are funny toys who quickly change their emotions. Chi Tao shouted at the men, whether they were Feng Miao's people or whether they were someone else on him. One of the men said that they were not enemies, but simply spies. Nobody hired them. they are just collecting information. Chi Tao said that if they were hostile, they would not have survived. Chi Tao believed that their play needed an audience, so the guys were lucky. Chi Tao said that the knight has a strong body, and he killed many strong people. The knight continued to look at him with an indifferent expression, and the guy said that he likes to look at strong emotions. Chi Tao said that since the knight is not afraid, he will have to show him what fear is. And the guy began to release even more silhouettes from his body. They began to surround the two men and the knight, each with a different emotion on their face. They tried to scare the knight with all their might, but he did not react to what was happening. So they came close to him, he did not feel any fear. The men were talking to each other, they couldn't believe that they would die on their first mission. The man tried to calm his friend down and said that the blonde would die first in any case. But it didn't work, because it became even more scary and the men cried. Chi Tao couldn't believe his eyes and was very angry, he did not understand why the knight was not afraid. Fong Ning said that out of all 4 people, he is the only one who is not afraid, so it's time to destroy the monsters. However, the system was in no hurry, it wanted to see what else Chi Tao had in store. Fong Ning was very scared, and he admitted that he was afraid of spirits, so he would not be very useful. The system was not very happy about this, she said that in this case she would take the first step. Therefore, the knight finally moved from his place and ran forward. Very soon the knight was already next to Chi Tao and was about to strike. Since the guy did not expect an attack on himself, the blow hit the target. Chi Tao of such a blow flew back, and his hands began to turn into smoke. The knight heard that electricity was starting to flow through the ghosts from above. The knight stood surrounded by a huge number of ghosts, and I heard the voice of Chi Tao, who ordered to find him. Fong Ning was very scared and decided that the system had ruined everything. The knight began to concentrate power in his hands, and they flashed yellow. The blonde began to draw a circle with his hands, he planned to deliver a particularly powerful blow. So the knight created a golden dragon and sent it to attack the ghosts. The golden dragon's body easily passed through the bodies of the ghosts. And they, shrouded in the golden aura of the dragon, began to disappear from this world. Therefore, the dragon easily found the real Chi Tao among all these ghosts. The guy ended up on the floor and couldn't believe that his plan had failed. He quickly got to his feet and asked the knight how he managed to find his true body. Chi Tao didn't know why his metamorphosis didn't work, but he didn't intend to die here. Suddenly, strange changes began to occur to his body, it grew uncontrolled. His clothes were torn and light was visible through his skin, Chi Tao didn't know what was happening to him. After that, the guy exploded due to the golden glow that was trying to break out. The knight and the men in suits watched as only small pieces remained of the guy. Fong Ning said that the guy had been marked purple on the map for a long time, and he was easy to find. For this battle they received 75,000 points, and were able to increase the level to 11, they also completed the first morality scale. The victory system smiled and said that, as promised, it was done in one movement. Fong Ning reluctantly admitted that the system quickly and easily managed completely. But then the guy realized that they had left one detail out, and it was bad. The system looked at the place where Chi Tao used to stand, and he asked, "Isn't the guy dead?" Fong Ning folded his arms and said that they had smashed the dragon and would no longer be able to use it. The men in suits came closer to the knight and began to bow to him and thank him for saving his life. The knight looked at them and ordered them to bring him the things that were scattered around. The men were very exhausted today, but they could not refuse the knight. So they went to search for important things at the scene. The man was telling President Xi that the mission was accomplished, therefore, he asked for the remaining payment. President Xi admitted that the information was impeccable and said that he should spend 50 million. The man extended his hand and said that the knight himself had helped them get closer to suppressing him. President Xi said that he would double the remaining amount, he had better not break the rules. He added that he no longer wanted to hear about any troubles from outside. The man laughed and said that they had already spent all the money and we can assume that from that moment everything went to dust. The man wondered if President Xi could sell them some information, they could deduct the payment from the price of their information. President Xi stood up from his seat and asked the man what information he wanted. The man said that the knight killed Chi Tao, therefore, they wondered what Dr. Chi Yunshan would do to take revenge. The man said, Chi Yunshan spoiled Chi Tao and plus, this old man had quite a lot of connections. President Xi said that even such a gifted doctor cannot operate on himself, so they will meet soon. The man was amused by this answer, and he said that it was not for nothing that people call him a magnanimous ruler. The man remained seated and said that for this information he would cut the fee in half. President Chi asked the man if he was going to use this information to bind the knight. The man adjusted his glasses and said that he was not going to share how he would use it. President Chi said that after this matter, the information needs to be updated a little, and the man agreed to share it with him for free. He said that the Truth Department people were completely wrong about the knight. At first they thought that his strength level was F, his development was limited, but now they had changed their minds. He was a noble person and had a B level, he often deceived scammers and was proficient in martial arts. Since the name was unknown, he was called a knight or hero of the city of Chi. The president believed that this was too loud a nickname. He believed that this was a powerful weapon in the hands of a man, and he laughed in response and said that the president is really smart. The man said that he heard that the Beauty and the Chi family were quite close to the knight and even learned some kind of martial art. The man said that with such an advantage, he could easily catch the knight. President Chi believed that the man was not going to give him such a valuable thing. The man was once again convinced of the man's intellectual abilities and asked to stay away from him. The man decided to share some information for free, and he said that the knight's eyes penetrate into the very depths. President Chi said that he was always fair and honest in his actions, so there was no danger. The men looked at the president incredulously and told him that self-confidence is always a good quality. The men decided to stop there today. Therefore, the man hurried out of President Chi's office, and while he was leaving, he said that they should wish each other happiness. President Chi silently watched him go and wanted him to quickly leave his office. Fong Ming was about to leave the hospital room, and he blamed Chi Tao for having to pretend. When the guy left the hospital, President Zhao called him. He was waiting for him at the car. Fong Ming was surprised that President Zhao did not lose interest in him after what happened. His daughter was also present in the car, and the guy did not understand why they were treating him so carefully. While he was in the hospital, they often came to him and brought him soup. And even if the taste was not perfect, sincere feelings of care were put into the food. Fong Ming looked at Lu Yao, who was sitting in the back seat looking out the window. The guy was very glad that he could still hope for marriage. He would have to wait for the 100th level. Unexpectedly, President Zhao asked Fong Ming how he was feeling. The guy awkwardly said that he allowed his anger to take over him, so he lost consciousness. He thanked the man for his concern. President Zhao said that the doctor found no problems with the body. The man asked to teach him how to eat properly. Fong Ming happily agreed and invited them to a banquet at his restaurant. They drove calmly along the road. The atmosphere in the car was great. The president happily agreed to come to the banquet. The system was unhappy because the guy invited people to a banquet, but the system would have to cook. Fong Ming began to strongly ask the system to help him just once too. He tried to convince the system that two people would not eat much. The system noticed that Zhao had a wife who would also come to the banquet with them, and she eats more than her husband and daughter. Fong Ming was glad that the system was subconsciously collecting information about the future mother-in-law. Then the guy offered to help raise another strong monster. But they didn't need it, but they needed to fill the rage scale. The guy said they defeated one ghost, but the whole legion is still scary. He believed that 3 rage scales were not enough. The system told him that they were afraid of the spirit. He shouldn't. People were much more dangerous because they quickly ran out of rage. The system said that using 1 skill per person would be effective, but fighting them for 4 hours would be stupid. Fong Ming agreed with the system and decided that they needed more rage scales. The system asked the guy to think about how to launch hidden settings. Fong Ming said that he would definitely come up with something to get more rage bars for battles. President Zhao dropped off. Fong Ming happily said goodbye to him. When President Zhao got back into the car, he asked his daughter what she thought about the son-in-law he had chosen. The guy fainted at the banquet, which was quite awkward, but it showed that he was not insidious. President Zhao assured her that as soon as she tried his food, she would fall in love completely. Yao Yao said that she knows that her father and mother are worried about her and want only the best for her. The man did not hear her words because of the loud car engine and asked her to repeat her words. The girl was surprised when she heard this, but she said her father was right, and the man praised her for it. Meanwhile, Fong Ming was in his system cyber cafe. The guy sat in his chair and thought hard about how he could get more rage. After some time, he admitted to the system that he could no longer think and had a headache. The system recognized that it was not so simple and offered to help its own with the preparation first. Fong Ning asked the system if it wasn't going to put off thinking about problems. The system threw up its hands and said that it does not think about them, it puts them in front of the guy so that he finds the answer. They heard a notification. The system said that some information had been received on the knight's online profile. It turned out that the Qi family would not take revenge on them because the grandfather passed away due to a heart attack last night. Fong Ning admitted that without the information that Feng Niao gave them, they would not have been able to cope. He also hinted that someone from the Qi family wanted to kill Qi Tao. The only thing that worried the guy was that they still didn't know who the customer was. The system said it was you, the son of the clan leader. He and the president of the pharmaceutical group relayed this information to them. The guy looked at the system and remembered that for her they were still good people. Fong Ning was stressed by the fact that the plan was amazing, and there was not a single clue anywhere. The guy came to one of his restaurants and all the cooks and waiters lined up in a living corridor. They were all waiting for special guests to come to their banquet. And finally, President Zhao and his family came to have a good evening at the restaurant. The guy began to meet them halfway and said that he was glad to see them. He wanted to tell them something else. The system threw him out of his body, and the phrase remained unfinished. Fong Ning asked not to make a problem to return him to his body, but the system believed that an accident might occur. The system asked the guy if there was anything he was afraid of besides ghosts and spirits. The guy was embarrassed and admitted that he was actually afraid of a lot of things, for example, some animals and killers. The system said that then the guy should get ready, because something might scare him. The system activated a new esoteric skill called Spirit Gaze. He gave the guy 30 minutes of true vision. A small purple streak appeared on Fong Ning's eyes, which improved his vision. The guy was very scared and screamed loudly. He was so scared that his hair stood on end. And he hurried to the blacksmith's house to hide there in his small shelter. The guy was sitting under the table and trembling all over with fear. He thanked the system and said that he did not expect this. There was a huge white snake next to President Zhao, standing where the president's wife should have been. She towered over the guy and had huge fangs, and she, as if nothing had happened, greeted the guy. The system sent the guy a notification that Madame Zhao's true form was a snake demon and he needed to make a choice. The first two options were a defeat for the guy and only in the third option everyone was happy. Therefore, of course, Fong Ning took the third option and independently prepared a delicious meal for everyone. Mrs. Zhao enjoyed tasting the culinary delights that Chef Fong Ning prepared for us. Lu Yao also enjoyed tasting the small fire-roasted pig. There was a huge variety of dishes on the table, and all the guests enjoyed their taste. Fong Ning brought a new delicious dish to the table to please his guests even more. President Zhao felt embarrassed by how rich and plentiful Fong Ning was treating them to. No matter, both his wife and daughter began to look at him menacingly to tell him to remain silent. And the president was forced to humble himself and ask the guy to continue, because they loved to eat. Fong Ning took the baked jacket and was about to put it on the table. I didn't have time to carry the plate of chicken because it was torn in half by the women at the table. After that, the guy put dishes on the table for President Zhao. Those who took chopsticks and were going to enjoy the taste did not have time. A moment later his plate was already empty. His wife and daughter had already eaten everything. The president was very embarrassed, and he asked the guy not to pay attention to it, because the girls were simply capricious in the family circle. Fong Ning said that he was very pleased that they treated him like family. The guy returned to the kitchen to deep fry the meat and serve it to the guests. He was calmly cooking when President Zhao walked into his kitchen. He was upset and asked the guy if he felt awkward at this dinner. The guy stood silently and looked forward, pondering the president's words. But in fact, the system at that moment swapped them. She returned the guy back to his body. The system said that the snake demons are gone now, and he can talk to President Zhao. Fong Ning didn't really want to come out of his hiding place, but he didn't have much choice. So he turned to the president and laughed awkwardly. He tried to convince him that everything was fine. The guy asked the president if women had awakened in him the ability to consume huge amounts of food. President Zhao said that she knew the chef wouldn't be upset, so she didn't stop them. They both always complained that the food wasn't good enough for them, and this was the first time he had seen them have such a good appetite. President Zhao admitted that the guy's culinary abilities exceeded all his expectations. Fong Ning was embarrassed and said that the man was simply too kind to him and he had room to grow. The man admitted that a few days ago his wife told him about his abilities. Therefore, he suggested telling the guy about it too. Fong Ning approached the man with disbelief and asked if he would definitely tell him. President Zhao hugged the guy by the shoulders, laughed and said that he was already like part of the family to them, so of course they would tell him. The man looked around nervously and checked that only the two of them were left in the kitchen. The president said that the whole point is that the lady comes from a dragon princess and therefore this is their normal appetite. The president said that his daughter also has the blood of dragons, but she is still too young to awaken. The guy remembered Madame Zhao's real appearance, and he was surprised that the dragon looked exactly like a snake. But the man regarded the guy's look differently and decided that he didn't believe him. Fong Ning hastened to convince the man that he was proud of the man, and that they could see how much they loved each other. President Zhao smiled widely and told the guy that he was good at choosing words. He patted Fong Ning on the shoulder and asked him not to be arrogant in the future. However, after Fong Ning found out who Lu Yao was, he didn't want to marry her at all. The guy felt awkward and said that he was just a homebody with little culinary skills. Suddenly, a system appeared behind him and said that something strange had just happened. She showed the guy the card. There were 3 huge green dots on it. The strongest of the Zhao family turned out to be Mrs. Fong Ning looked at them with interest and noticed that they were all good people. The man noticed the guy's hesitation and began asking if he was tired and if everything was okay. The man began to reach out his hand to Fong Ning, and the guy returned to the real world again. A notification appeared in front of the guy that he was at the beginning of an important phase and had to make a choice. The first and second options again ended catastrophically badly, and the third suggested postponing an important decision. Naturally, the guy had no other option other than the third. The man noticed that Fong Ning was flying in the clouds again, and he decided that this was how he regained his strength. The guy took on a thoughtful expression and told the man that he had heard that until the bloodline awakens, it is better not to get married. Because getting married before awakening can lead to a decrease in the strength and purity of the bloodline. The guy admitted that he could not hide this information because it was unfair to the Zhao family. President Zhao was grateful to Guy for telling him this, and he promised to talk to his wife. Thus, they sat at dinner until nightfall. Their meal had already ended and Mrs. Zhao sat at the table and listened to her husband's story. When President Zhao finished his story, he looked at his family and began to wait for their reaction. His wife smiled slightly and said that the guy passed the last test. Therefore, it was decided to leave everything as it is for now, and return to this issue when Lu Yao's powers awaken.